most of you watching.
Hello. How's everyone doing? New video is ready for release, so that will finally be coming out tomorrow. And there might be a video also coming out Monday. Probably not. Zizek takes are very questionable, like how he supported the 1999 bombing of Yugoslavia, for example. Socialism for All is a great video compilation of Zizek. Yep, we are watching that today because it is pretty damning. Um, so yeah, Slavoj Zizek is like the most popular Marxist thinker, like pretty much in the world. Um, and the thing is, he's there's a reason he's so popular, and that's because in reality he's not very Marxist at all. He's not very socialist at all. There's an incredible amount of evidence for this, yet a lot of people who call themselves communists, particularly left communists, vouch for Zizek, and they praise Zizek and love Zizek, and it's like, and then you look at the things he actually says, and it's like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? So, yeah. He's got some pretty weird takes that we're going to look at and pretty much destroy the idea that this guy's actually like a socialist or a Marxist at all, really. To be honest, as soon as I saw BreadTube supporting Zizek, I knew something was up. Yeah, I mean, I think there's YouTube channels about Zizek. There's also I know Zizi is a fan of Zizek. Vosh is a fan of Zizek, so that should tell you about everything you need to know about him, pretty much. Gabriel Rockhill said it best when he called Zizek capitalism's court jester. Yeah, so there was an article by this guy named Gabriel Rockhill that went pretty viral. That kind of just destroys him. It goes like in depth into all the fucked up and weird shit he's said and done. I'm not going to read through the whole entire thing. I think Non-Compete did a live stream where he looked at the article all the way through. If people want to watch that. Hakeem is also a fan of Zizek. Yeah, I think Hakeem's probably just misguided on that. I think he hasn't seen the things Zizek has said, because I do know Ugopnik is a big fan of Zizek, and yeah, Ugopnik is a very big fan. He actually shat on this article. He didn't like refute it in any way. He just shat on it, and Ugopnik is not a bad person. He seems like a good person. He seems more reformist oriented than someone like Hakeem, but you know, he's not a bad guy. I think it's just because he's from the Balkans. You know, he has a fucking emotional attachment. You know, because Zizek is like the big guy from the Balkans. Ugopnik also loves Tito, who I've also heard bad things about, but I don't know. Yeah, but this article really destroys him. It has like tons of citations. It shows all the fucked up things he's said and done. So, highly recommend reading it. And just some of the citations he links to are pretty damning. Like, for example, here, this is Zizek's writing. He admits, I myself was personally engaged in undermining the Yugoslav socialist order. So he openly admits, and there's more evidence of this, that he was straight up involved in trying to sabotage Yugoslavia, which is like fucking bizarre. Yeah, I mean, just the fact that Vosh loves Zizek, there's nothing more you need to know. There's nothing that's like, okay, he's bad. Like, that's all you need to know. There's a reason he's the most popular Marxist in the West, because he's not a Marxist. He's incredibly reformist. He constantly talks about how we need to move away from Marxism. We need to have like a new definition, a new conception of all this. And really all that any of that means is just like, he's a social democrat, basically. And this fucking clip is fucking damning.
Nek tragični moment, ki se meni zdi ključen. Strinjam se, da ima privatna lastnina svoje, kako bi rekel, nevarne zle potencijale, če ne se moralično izrazim. Samo, jaz bi ponovil tukaj Churchillov paradoks. Je najslabši vseh možnih sistemov, težava je v tem, da ni, kot kaže izkustvo, nobenega ostalega, ki bi bil boljši. Se pravi,
he outright says it right there. He said, I think this is in a debate for the presidency of Slovenia, where he ran as like a social democrat party. He openly says private property, the ownership of private property is not a great system, but it's better than all the others. So there's a difference between private property and personal property in Marxism. Private property is like the ownership of factories, all of that stuff, all the stuff that capitalists own. Personal property is like your laptop, your toothbrush, all that. You can keep your personal property, but the private property is bad. And Zizek openly just says private property is not good, but it's better than any other system. So he's just directly saying socialism is bad. So you might say, oh, this is like 30 years ago, like maybe he's changed now. No, he hasn't. Here he is in June of 2022 saying that we need a bigger NATO. Basically, this article is saying we need a bigger NATO. It says it right here. The least we owe Ukraine is full support, and to do this, we need a stronger NATO. So like, he's NATO was key in destroying socialism in Europe. NATO was, the destruction of Libya. And I'm not for the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but obviously a bigger, stronger NATO is not the answer. So this guy is literally just a fucking spicy liberal, or like a spicy social democrat. Yugobnik is not a reformist guy. I think he has a personal attachment to Zizek. And in his video about Yugoslavia, he states that he's more supportive of the Soviet system than Yugoslavia's. Huh, that's interesting. Does he really say that? I think Yugobnik is obviously like a socialist. I think he's a little bit reformist, but maybe I'm wrong. And yeah, that's what I said, is that he has a personal attachment to Zizek. But what really prompted me to actually go into this guy was that Socialism for All made a video about him, and he says some crazy shit. And the theory that I like about like what Zizek is, and the reason people love him so much, is he's just like, he talks so much and so fast and over himself and constantly. It's and in his books I've heard it's very similar as well. It's basically, it's like people just want to feel smart by reading what he says, and then they inject their own meaning into his words in a way that they believe what he's saying is Marxist, when really he's just a sophist who loves using all these big words and these long sentences that don't really lead to anything. And the article also talks about this. My favorite line is, Zizek is the mystery man from the East, a literal caricature of the crazy Marxist, best captured by the sobriquet, the Board of Philosophy, rose like a perverted phoenix publicly masturbating over the flames that had destroyed Soviet-style socialism. So, yeah, so we're going to watch this video and see some of his takes, because they are something.
I'm not in any way trying to rehabilitate Lenin. No, I think the only authentic tragedy was October Revolution. In the sense of, I don't buy this story that it was just a Bolshevik coup d'etat. Because whatever Lenin thought, there was public unrest, support, and so on. But then, I don't think October Revolution was lost really in the Civil War. There you have to be brutal. But the most tragic period is for me early 20s, when Bolsheviks won, and then they encountered the real task. Now we have power. How we will change everyday life? They have these wonderful problems, you know. If we are an atheist country, how will we do burials or marriages, all this? And there it was clear that the game is over. What I would say is that look first.
I mean, there's nothing too wrong with that. He doesn't really go into depth with why the game is over, but he says, I'm not trying to rehabilitate Lenin, so it seems anti-Lenin according to that passage.
I didn't, Michael, I'm not crazy. I didn't edit collected works of Lenin. I haven't read them, never. What interested me is...
So he says right there, I haven't read Lenin's works, by the way. What did Ugopnik say about this article? I think he was just on Twitter and someone said, like, Ugopnik, what do you think? And he said it's garbage or something. Zizek sniffs and scratches his nose a lot, which I find to be a little bit distracting. Oh no, yeah, it is hard for me to watch him. He's doing so much. It's very difficult for me to watch him. Does he even call himself a leftist? Yeah, he calls himself a Marxist. Again, he is very similar in a lot of ways to Vosh. He calls himself a Marxist, he calls himself a socialist, but the things he says are not socialist, often.
Is Lenin at a very precise moment.
And he openly says right here, he hasn't read the works of Lenin.
I didn't edit collected works of Lenin. I haven't read them, never. What interested me is Lenin at a very precise moment. What fascinates me in Lenin, and I said this in both of my introductions to some texts, that first, Lenin's time is over. I don't play the boring Trotskyite game of, this crazy dream. Oh, if only Lenin were to survive 2 years longer, he would have made a pact with Trotsky, Stalin would be sidestepped, and so on. No, the deadlock was there from the beginning. So, but what interests me in Lenin, and maybe that's what we need.
He's not even wrong in saying that, the Trotskyists, he's right in saying that. The Trotskyists are delusional in thinking that, Trotsky would have allied with Lenin. Trotsky was a complete douchebag to Lenin. He constantly ignored what Lenin said. He constantly went against what Lenin said. He constantly took the contrarian position. So yeah, the whole Trotsky thing is incredibly inaccurate. My Lenin's Testament video shows this.
Is this totally pragmatic, voluntarist spirit? Isn't it clear that in 1917 it was a total mess? Lenin often didn't know what to do. Some even liberal communists praise his statement revolution. But what he says there is something that he immediately abandoned then. What interests me is especially Lenin in 21-22, and this was the big failure of the October Revolution. They want the civil war. And then it would have been my moment, okay, now it's everyday life, invent new forms if you can. They failed. But Lenin was at least the one who, he said openly, our situation is totally...
So he's saying they failed in inventing, I assume, any new form of life or changing anything. They made a lot of innovations. They made so many innovations that no other country ever did before. Like Terry Martin says, they made more innovations in their policies for nationalities than like any other country in history up to that point, in terms of giving minorities rights. These rights were, like, you know, rolled back to a certain extent over time, but it was extremely advanced for the time, and yeah, it's just ridiculous to say that, like, they didn't invent anything new, or they didn't accomplish anything new. The Stakhanovite movement in the USSR was like the most rights workers had ever been granted ever. The rights given to women were incredibly innovative in a lot of ways. So I don't know what he's saying.
Desperate. We don't have any formula. He didn't have any trust in the future. He saw this total openness. That's what fascinates me, but I'm not preaching in any sense the return to it. So my idea, unfortunately, I'm here maybe a little bit more, let's call it pessimist. I really think, and incidentally, in this metaphor of returning to zero level, I quote Lenin, who wrote in 21-22 a wonderful text where he said, nothing worked. Then he said, it's not that...
I'm confused because he's literally said, I haven't read the works of Lenin, and now he's talking about, like, Lenin's works and the things he's written. I guess maybe he means he's read, like, small parts of it.
We should stabilize our achievements, but we should return to the zero level, begin from nowhere. And quoting data which also you mentioned, the horrible, the fact that the only livable communism today, communism in the formal sense, the Chinese one, means ecological problems, more digital control, and so on and so on. We have to begin in some sense from the zero. Lenin already did this not just as a good direction. If you are a dogmatic Marxist, you can show that Lenin totally overturned Marx and so on. In this sense, Lenin was not the one of the fidelity to Marx. He pretended to be, but you know how religious revolutions also work. All great revolutions...
What the fuck is he saying right now? Like, what is he saying? Lenin overturned Marx? Lenin was totally different from Marx? I don't know what he's trying to say.
If you are a dogmatic Marxist, you can show that Lenin totally overturned Marx and so on. In this sense, Lenin was not the one of the fidelity to Marx. He pretended to be, but you know how religious revolutions also work. All great revolution proclaims itself a return to origins. Martin Luther, the greatest religion, we just want to return to the original Bible and so on. So, no, I think, again, that we have to, with all objective study and so on, see the good, bad sides, but the 20th century communism was ultimately a failure, an absolute failure.
So he's saying we have to start from scratch. We have to start over. What the fuck does that mean? What are you saying, dude? What the fuck are you talking about? Like, what is that supposed to mean? Like, and then at the end, my favorite quote, 20th century communism was a failure. An absolute failure. It's just ridiculous to say that. It's so fucking privileged and disgusting to say that. Like, you can say that it failed in terms of actually establishing world socialism. It failed in terms of, you know, creating a world socialist system. But the idea that it failed was a complete failure, an absolute failure, is insane. What the fuck? The USSR was the only reason the world isn't way worse than it is now. The USSR gave material support to numerous anti-colonial movements, as did Cuba in like Angola. And sometimes these movements went poorly, like Ethiopia went poorly in a lot of ways. But to say that it was a complete failure is such a ridiculous thing to say. And it's just completely conceding to the reactionaries. Oh yeah, you know what? Yeah, communism was a complete failure. We got to start over. He's the classic left communist who just completely embarrasses himself and embarrasses socialism by saying, "Oh yeah, no, all that communism, all that socialism, failure, terrible. No, we got to start over."
Crazy. We need the Leninist revolution. You have one question afterwards. In what sense I am a Leninist? Well, maybe you know my answer. For 3 reasons. First reason is, I always say, repeat Lenin today, not in the sense of doing the same.
That is one of the title of your books.
Yeah. But I make it clear that Lenin is there to repeat, is to do it again, but precisely correcting Lenin's mistakes. What I mean by this, you know which Lenin I like? At the end of the World War I, or in World War I, not only Lenin, the entire left was shocked by this patriotic term. You know, all social democratic parties in Europe, when the war began, voted for war credits and so on. And Lenin was totally devastated.
Oh, my bad. I keep doing that. I'm sorry.
I mean, this is the Lenin I like. This idea.
You're not missing anything. It's just.
And we don't have simple answers to it. It's not enough to stick to the old line. We have to rethink everything. Now, I'm not one of those Trotskyists, idiots who claim, oh, if only Lenin were to survive 2-3 years more, we would have a different Soviet Union. No, somehow at a deeper level, Stalinism was there present as a most probable version, and so Lenin cannot be simply excused, you know. But you know, where
what does that mean? Stalinism was there at a deeper level. Like, he just says things, and it's like, can you explain? Can you elaborate? But then he just goes, and then he just moves on.
Still admire Lenin. The last years of Lenin's life, he was pretty desperate. And okay, let's not lose time with this, but I will tell you something. I wrote about it now. It shocked me. You know, everybody who tries to redeem Lenin quotes his famous testament where he said we should depose Stalin and so on. But how many people noticed a simple thing? What are Lenin's arguments against Stalin? It's not the political line, Stalin is too right. No, it's shocking. It's a question of manners. Lenin is saying Stalin is too rude and so on and so on. And this is not just with Stalin. I find this so admirable. It's not radical enough. Lenin was guilty for it. But how, all of a sudden, in the last years, Lenin saw that this brutality of political life is extremely dangerous. And all of a sudden, he was obsessed with this idea, just bring more civilized talk, politeness, and so on and so on. Also, in his other proposals, you have this, and this is very actual today, incidentally, with Donald Trump. You know, we are entering a new age of political brutality. So this is one thing. Second thing is what I already said. This awareness that the old left is over. We have to rethink everything. And so to be a Leninist today is not to return to Lenin, but to scrap even Lenin and start. You know, I quote in one of my books, Lenin wrote a wonderful text about climbing a high mountain. When he's in a revolutionary process, you see you're in a wrong path. And then you have to return down to the starting point and do it again. This is what the left has to do it.
My last question, which is, we just...
So yeah, he keeps saying that we have to abandon Lenin. And then he obfuscates it by saying, like, Lenin wrote this wonderful thing, or Lenin had this great idea. But then at the same time he says, we need to abandon Lenin. Like, no. No, we don't. And it's clearly what it is for him is it's the optics, right? It's like the USSR, bad things happened, right? So it's like the optics of it's the optics of the USSR, bad things happened, right? There were mistakes made. So and also, you know, about the Lenin's Testament, I did a video about that, if you guys haven't seen it. the hold on. It's were Lenin's final words faked? That's about Lenin's testament. I think I pretty convincingly show that the testament was quite likely faked, at least in part. So, yeah, I mean, he's referencing a document that is likely not even real in the first place.
Past the 100th anniversary of the Russian Revolution, there seemed to be relatively little recognition of this momentous event. Why do you think that is? And you have another book which came out this year about Lenin and the Russian Revolution. Can you perhaps say something about this? How do you see the function, the legacy, or whatever, something to be learned from the Russian Revolution now?
I think we should... First, I still think, to put it very simply, I still think that October Revolution was not simply a coup d'etat of Bolsheviks, an elite there. It was an authentic event, an explosion. And I think it was, at the same time, an authentic tragedy. I don't believe in those Trotskyites or others' dreams, you know. If only Lenin were to survive 3 years and make a pact with Trotsky, it would have been from democracy and so on and so on. So I think that what we should focus, or we should follow, and that's the point of my introduction to Lenin's late writings, this despair of the last 2 years of Lenin, where, when being fully responsible for the state of things with Stalin and so on, gaining power, it became clearer and clearer to him that something went terribly wrong. And so that, okay, read the book so that I don't lose time. I would like to point this out. You also point this point. You know that famous Lenin's so-called testament, asking the Politburo to remove Stalin. Today especially, and also in view of Trump and other obscenities, we should be attentive to this along the lines of what I mentioned, moral majority and so on. Read it. Lenin's approach to Stalin is not wrong political line, whatever. It is Stalin doesn't have good manners. He is too rude, too brutal, and so on and so on. This is a beautiful point. Lenin coming to this simple ethical point, we need proper manners, and so this is not as naive as it may appear. Because rudeness always serves a certain function, and I say this as somebody who still counts myself as a communist, in communist discourse. For example, the last obscenity, trigger warning, but it's not a good one. You know, when the great leap forward in China, this attempted fast industrialization, turned wrong terribly, and there were millions of deaths. Mao convoked a meeting in Lushan, 59, of party elite, and it was supposed to be a self-critical meeting. And it is to understand the rhetoric. Why? When he was talking about millions dead.
So now he talks about Mao. It's not anything interesting.
But in Stalinism was a genuine tragedy, which is why, in contrast to fascism, dissidence is an inner dialectic of this tragic turn of communism. You don't have some marginal, but nobody in Germany, as far as I know, accused Hitler in the same way as Trotsky accused Stalin of betraying the revolution. I don't remember anyone accusing Hitler of this. And now, just to conclude, I would like to praise your book, which is there also to sign. In your book on voice, and also in your works already decades ago, you also point out, and we developed it then together, his wonderful book, Voice and Nothing More, Mladez. I don't know if you included this, this basic difference between fascism and Stalinism. Fascism, Hitler is a figure of voice. Stalin is a figure of writing, interpretation of sacred texts, and so many other things follow for this. Just one example to amuse you, and that's why I was laughing at you gently. I was waiting for you at the beginning. Check it out on YouTube. Whenever a fascist leader makes a speech, of course, the people applaud, but the leader just accepts the applause. In Stalinism, the leader simply joins the applause. Why? Because it's still this message of enlightenment, I'm ultimately one of you, and so on. It's totally different position. Another example, I read this in Anne Applebaum book on Gulag. You know that every year, in Gulag, in the mosques, on Stalin's birthday, all the inmates...
That's so fucking funny that he just said he read Anne Applebaum's book on the gulags. That's so fucking funny, dude. This guy is so fucking dumb. Like, I cannot believe that of all the people you could reference having read, it would be Anne Applebaum, who is, like, of the modern era, easily one of the worst historians of the USSR. She's an open right-wing libertarian. She's insane. And she does the same Robert Conquest thing of constantly citing, you know, just, like, the personal testaments of, like, fascists, basically. By the way, is the audio all right? Because I'm always fucking up the audio, and I want to get better at that. But yeah, that's just so funny.
Were collected, and each had to sign a telegram to Stalin wishing him happy Okay, it was a fake, but you cannot even imagine the same thing in Nazism, collecting all the Jews in Auschwitz and making them sign. It was a totally different discourse. And today, more than ever, when we have this liberal dismissal, they are all the same. No, Stalinism was a nightmare, totally. But it's not the same. Again, it was a tragedy from which we have to learn a lot. It was a tragic twist. Maybe it was inevitable, but to finish nonetheless again with you with Beckett, you know, like the lesson with Stalinism is try again, fail better. Right? This is definitely not the lesson what we should do with Hitler.
So yeah, it's like the audio could be a little bit louder for the video. But yeah, it's like Stalinism was a nightmare. It's like, this guy is clearly just reading people like Anne Applebaum constantly. And I don't know if that is like... Well, no, it is conscious. It is deliberate. Because you can literally see him in the fucking 90s openly saying private property is a better system than anything else we have. So yeah, I mean... He just distorts socialism. He distorts Marxism. And he's very much a left communist in a lot of ways, in terms of just how he's so desperate to not treat it with any nuance, not treat it with any, like, you know, complexity, and just be like, it's terrible, like, abandon it all. But yeah. I think he said... Okay, yeah, he did. If you measure at some abstract level of suffering, Stalinism was worse than Nazism. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? That's just such an insanely fucked up thing to say. Absolutely wild. That's just such an absolutely wild thing to say. So is it really any wonder that this guy is like the most popular Marxist philosopher? Because he basically just says what people want a Marxist to say. And he also, in his craziness, in his wackiness, he's funny, you know? He's funny enough to hang around, to have around as like a court jester, a funny little guy in the corner, just prattling on in between his sniffs about how Stalinism was worse than Nazism. Another thing about him is he's a sophist, and he loves getting a rise out of people. He loves surprising people, shocking people, you know, and that's just another part of it all is he knows saying something like this is going to get a big shock out of people. He knows that's going to be like, what? But, you know, that's what he does. He's basically a troll at a fundamental level. He's kind of just a troll. Anyways, so someone shared this video. I think this is a Eastern European channel. I'm not sure, but he made a video about America, and it's I've heard it's funny, so we'll see. Could you react to at least part 1 of Oversimplified's 16-minute video on the Cold War, warning it's Western capitalist propaganda? Yeah, I actually used to love Oversimplified back when I was like more of a liberal. It was very funny. I thought it was genuinely funny. I'm sure they're a fucking terrible channel. If I were to watch them now. Oversimplified Cold War Part 1. 56 million views. Holy fuck. Jesus Christ. Oh my god. I mean, I could. I could watch this. I might put this off. I'm not sure though. I wanted to watch this first though, because this might require me reading up a little bit on some things that he might mention that I'd want to be able to, you know, properly respond to. But let's check this video out.
Most of you watching this video are from America. Whether you're from the good part of America or the bad part of America, still America. I want to tell you about this absolutely insane and exciting country which basically shapes the world we live in today. The American society is very interesting because it's made out of every kind of people. You will find every race and every person from every single country there. And this is one of the biggest strengths of America, because people from different countries coming to America can bring their best abilities to the country. For example, the Germans get to do their funny engineering by getting hired at NASA after World War II. Georgians get to do their fighting. The Polish can be gay in peace. The French can finally design their clothing because they have time away from protesting. And Ukrainians can finally develop their video games without getting shot at. Most Ukrainians are in Canada though. We all know that Crimea is Ukraine, but the real ones know that Canada is also Ukraine. The US also has a thriving entertainment industry, producing basically every popular movie and TV show in the world. There's something for everyone, from Broadway to Hollywood, to furries, to Comic-Con, to TwitchCon, just everything. Plus, the US has iconic attractions like the Statue of Liberty, the Grand Canyon, Mount Rushmore, NBA Youngboy. You know, everything. American schools are also one of the best in the world, but also the number one in being the most bullshit. The quality is extremely good, but doesn't really matter if you're gonna be 100,000 in debt. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think I have to think about that for a bit. You might think that America's number.
I was blown away when I realized that, like, colleges like Harvard and the Ivy League colleges in general, they don't have full rides. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard this repeatedly, that they actually do not have anything like a full ride at all. And it was like, hearing that was just like, oh my god, like, how can you call a country like this a meritocracy when the best schools don't have any free rides, and therefore the poorest people, no matter how competent they are, no matter how intelligent they are not going to be able to attend these types of schools. They could risk the loan and the debt, but a lot of people, when they're faced with that bargain or that bet that they have to make, they're not going to take that bet. I know personally someone in my life who didn't take the bet, who could have gone to like a fantastic college, but they knew that they would have to, you know, go into to pay loans. And a lot of people, you know, obviously that's a very scary thing.
On export is petroleum or some shit, but no, it's culture. American culture is made up of many different cultures, along with its own deep beliefs and values. The US is diverse, with many different ethnicities and backgrounds, so there is no one culture that makes up the US. It's not like when you go to a foreign country and everything is the same, but rather it's a mix of different cultures. It's shaped by its history, with the values and beliefs of the founding fathers still being important today. The country's geography, such as its large size and varied landscape, also affects the culture. For example, if the US was smaller and the terrain wasn't so rough, not everyone would be driving a pickup. For example, people in Europe drive small hatchbacks most of the time because the roads are narrow and it doesn't make sense to drive a pickup. But in the US, it's the complete opposite, and the Ford F-150 has been the top-selling vehicle for 46 years straight. International cultures have a big impact on America too, because without immigration and cultural exchange, America would not be where it's at today. This has led to new cultures and traditions being brought in, which have been accepted and integrated into USA culture, such as the popularization of drinking came from all the Irish immigrants. The New York pizza came, of course, from Italians. Gay sex came from Greeks. White people came from the Netherlands, and etc, etc. Also, I've gotten a ton of requests regarding my merch, saying, I can't buy it, Gatsu, what the fuck, the website to in culture, and you can literally find every kind of food you can imagine. There are like 20 billion Georgian restaurants in America, and American entertainment is just iconic. If you're going to watch a movie, you're gonna be watching either a movie from your native country or most likely an American movie or a TV show. Literally everything that people watch is made there. I also like Korean movies, such as anything Bong Joon-ho does, but I know most people just watch Hollywood movies and that's it. American culture is so unbelievably popular that if you don't censor it like China banning South Park, you will know it. Movies in GTA San Andreas are literally actually the only reason I became proficient in English. And that goes for every foreigner I know that learned English. Nobody who's actually good at this language learns it from, okay, this is past tense, this is present tense. No, you learn it because there was a movie.
A lot of people are fans of South Park, but like both of the creators are admittedly like centrist politically, which I think is just very funny because it's such a bizarre over the top show in terms of its politics. But like both of the creators of South Park have admitted to being like centrist politically, which is very funny. But yeah, I mean, this video is not like terrible so far, but we'll see.
You wanted to watch the dub was shit, or a game you wanted to play and you translate it through Google Translate, and soon enough you just mastered the whole language. The French president Emmanuel Macron is spending hundreds of millions to boost the popularity of the French language worldwide. He doesn't realize that if he just
Okay, that's really fucking funny. That's super funny. Oh my god. Imagine spending hundreds of millions of dollars trying to spread the French language.
did cool fucking movies with explosions, and if the next GTA was only in French, he would get a better result. This cultural impact goes into the physical world too. The Statue of Liberty, Mount Rushmore, and Times Square are literally known throughout the world. The most popular trucks in the world, American. The most popular movies and shows in the world, American. The most popular music in the world, Canadian. The US is also a huge supporter of sports, which I really like. Sports are very fun, and my favorite one to watch is UFC, because yeah, sure, you can throw balls around. The US is very divided in politics, but I don't know enough about that to go into it, and frankly, I don't care. I got my own corruption to think about, and my own neighbors. People think America is racist, and of course racism is everywhere. You will always find idiots in any country. But here's the thing. Now, I don't mean to brag, but racism is way more prevalent in Europe than in America or Canada. For example, I tweeted this. Just a funny tweet, hilarious joke, love it. And upon seeing the Georgian flag in my name, a Russian male got offended, and he replied to me, Georgians are sub You're not white. Ukraine's losing the war. I was like Uncle Ruckus.
Oh, the white man's science is amazing, ain't it? Well, no, this can't be. It says I'm 102% African with a 2% margin of error. Why, Lord? Why, Lord, why?
I looked in the mirror and decided to accept the truth. I was African Georgian. After accepting the truth, I realized that this guy only no money. And of course, no McDonald's. America is known for its big, juicy economy, being the richest country on earth by GDP, since basically everything is made there. iPhone, American. YouTube, American. Google, Facebook, Tesla, Ford, Microsoft, Amazon, Disney. Everything is basically American, so it makes perfect sense they have the highest GDP in the world. Because to be honest, who the fuck would want to use Huawei phones when they could get an iPhone? Not only is it shit, but it's also communist. Trust me, I've had my fair share of Chinese phones, and I choose an iPhone every time. The fact that one country can hold this much power is absolutely astonishing to me, and not in like a scary, oh, they have so much power way, but just pure amazement, because they make things that the whole world uses, and things that the whole world watches. And this is only because of the amazing talent this country produces, and this country produces amazing talent because people from all around the world go there.
This is just the apolitical. This is like just the apolitical person's conception. It's just like America big. America have big territory. America have Google and Facebook and Microsoft. Wow, big America. So awesome. So big. Global ban on the French language now. Yes. I approve of that. South Park is postmodern and light and centrist garbage. Yeah, pretty much.
There, and I like, okay, let's make some cool shit happen. One of the things I admire the most is how easy it is to be considered American. Doesn't matter the race or religion or how long you've lived in the US. As long as you speak English and have a passport, you're American.
Thoughts on China banning South Park? I mean, I assume that they were talking some incredibly racist, out of touch, stupid ass garbage about China. I mean, it's not like a big deal to me. Is it right to ban things because they're racist garbage? I don't think it's wrong, but I'm almost certain it was probably that they just have some episodes that are just incredibly, you know, racist and insulting and, yeah.
And to be honest, I don't see the US being dethroned in the money sector anytime soon, just because of the pure talent this country produces. I know people are worried about China, but to be honest, I highly doubt China can do shit, and the only reason behind that is their treacherous regime and treating their people like shit. I know there's this whole thing of collecting data through the software you use, but I would much rather the American government have my data than China's government.
Okay, now this video is taking a turn into just suddenly being like incredibly pro-America imperialist garbage out of nowhere.
But to be honest, I highly doubt China can do shit, and the only reason behind that is that
China can't do shit, bro. China don't got all the fighter jets, bro, and all the nuclear warheads, bro.
treacherous regime and treating their people like shit. I know there's this whole thing of collecting data through the software you use, but I would much rather the American government have my data than China's government. Commies. Everyone in my country has personally experienced communism, and let me tell you, it ain't good. The crazy thing is, I'm not even getting paid by the CIA to say this. It's just personal experience. You look at any post-Soviet country right now, and yeah, they're cool, but a lot of them are ridden by corruption, no money, and just massive amounts of bullshit. And someone actually
It's just so dumb. It's just so fucking dumb, man. Oh my god. Ugopnik has a great video talking about this. They're just so brainwashed. Eastern Europe, it's so sad, and Georgia and all those countries, it's so sad what's happened in those countries. The incredible, it's been over 30 years since the USSR collapsed. There's no fucking excuses about how the USSR caused, or it's the USSR's fault that all these countries are struggling economically. But these people are brainwashed. They grow up in school. The school system, the political system, everything is incredibly right-wing. And they grow up in their schools learning about how bad the USSR was. Because the politicians... Ugopnik makes a great video about this again. The politicians, to this day, blame all of the country's problems on communism. And they just say, oh, you know, the Soviets ruined our country. We're still trying to recover from what the Soviets did. It's been over 30 years. There's no excuses. The reason your country is so shit is not because of communism. People in Eastern Europe need to realize that it's not because of communism that their countries suck. It's because of capitalism. It's because of the neoliberalization of their economies. It's because of the looting of their economies. But these poor people are just completely brainwashed. And then they play the worst, most fucking obnoxious card they can possibly play, which is my personal experience card. I have personal experience. Okay, I have personal experience in America and I think it's shit. Checkmate. Right? Like, if personal experience is such an authoritative excuse to support the things you say, well, America sucks. Okay, I guess America's bad. We don't need any evidence. We don't need any data. We don't need any historical context. That's it. America's bad. GG. Pack up the bags. We're done. We're done, right? They don't have to show any evidence. They don't have to explain. They don't have to go into any depth. They don't need to talk about imperialism. They don't need to talk about why America is as rich as it is. They don't need to do any of that. No, just, I have personal experience. Communism bad. Communism bad. USA good.
a lot of them just personal experience. It ain't good. The crazy thing is, I'm not even getting paid by the CIA to say this. It's just personal experience. You look at any post-Soviet country right now, and yeah, they're cool, but a lot of them are ridden by corruption, no money, and just massive amounts of bullshit. And someone...
This guy is just a complete idiot. Like, okay, let's look at Africa. A lot of Africa never had any communist government. And yet it's not in a good place right now. Okay? That's not just evidence to just say the Soviet Union used to be a part of this country used to be a part of the Soviet Union, look at it now. This oh my god. Oh. Oh my god.
Actually commented on a video of mine about this. He said socialism has made the Georgians lazy, meaning this is basically what the country is broke, the people are lazy, when the real reason is everything that came with communism takes time to recover, to transition into an ideology that...
Look at this brainwashed fucking moron. He's literally proving my point. He's literally saying it right there. He's saying exactly what the politicians say. Communism ruined everything, it destroyed everything, and it's gonna take a while for the country to recover. My dude, it's been 30 fucking years. Your country is never going to recover. Your country is always going to suck so long as it exists under capitalism. Georgia is not one of the big players, my friend. Georgia is not France, it's not Germany, it's not the UK, and it's not America. And it's not Japan, and it's not South Korea, and it's not Australia, and it's not the Scandinavian countries. You're never going to recover. Your country is never, ever, ever going to be in a good place because people like you will endlessly listen to the politicians saying, we're just trying to recover from the communism. Give us 50 more years. Give us 200 more years and we'll finally be recovered from the communism. These people are brainwashed, and it's incredibly sad how completely and totally right-wingers have just taken over the education system and the political system, and it's a disaster. And the collapse of the USSR was the greatest humanitarian disaster of the 20th century, and its ramifications are still being felt today from people like this who don't know what they're talking about, who aren't educated, who don't know what capitalism is, who don't know what imperialism is, and who definitely do not know what communism is.
It is not dumb and doesn't include free trips to Siberia. It's not the people that are lazy and just don't want to...
Fake picture, by the way. That's not a real fucking picture. People always refer to that. It's made up that he was removed from the picture.
Trips to Siberia. It's not the people that are lazy and just don't want to work, because people in the Eastern world work like crazy, and here's the proof. A lot of Georgians started immigrating to America. If you live in New York City, you might have noticed it as well. And the people from my country who go there start making above the average salary in a matter of months. Oh yeah, you want me to work as a truck driver for long hours, but you'll pay me $100 grand to do it? Brother, I used to work in a call center for 10 hours a day back in Georgia for $500. I'm taking that job in a fucking heartbeat. So it's not the people...
Now this guy is just even more showing how propagandized he is, because I know Ugopnik talked about how he went to the USA to work. He went to the USA to on like a work study from the Balkans or whatever. And it wasn't pleasant, and I'm pretty sure he did not get paid very well. So this guy is just incredibly propagandized, and I think this guy's whole channel, or this whole video, is just a great example of... People say, like, oh, everyone outside of America hates America. But not exactly. I mean, there's a lot of people who are just completely and totally brainwashed, like this guy, who actually do not hate America and who are under the delusion that America is a paradise. And it's often apolitical people, like this guy clearly is, who just have absolutely no clue what they're talking about, but yet are extremely confident at the same time.
People that are the problem. It's just that the US economy is so good, it allows things like this to happen. Also, it's called the land of opportunities for a reason. It is probably the easiest country in the world where you can escape poverty and bad living if you got dealt a bad hand in life. Now I know what you're thinking. Well, Gatsu, fuck you, it's not. No, fuck you, it is. It's the easiest place in the world to make money in. You know what you can do?
And this is why people like this guy, they openly... People like this guy will always openly side with fascism and imperialism, because it's just like, he doesn't care about why the country's rich. I mean, maybe not. Okay, maybe if you educated him, maybe if you sat him down and like educated him on why America is so wealthy, he would get it. But I don't know. Is this guy related to Ugopnik in any way? I have no clue. The argument levied against the people with personal positive experience with the USSR is you've been brainwashed. Yeah, I know. If it's negative, if your experience is negative on socialism, you are given money, you are given speaking tours, you are given the adoring ears of thousands of people who just want to hear every single word about how bad communism is. But if you have positive experience like Luna Oi, you are a propagandist, brainwashed piece of shit commie.
It is probably the easiest country in the world where you can escape poverty and bad living if you got dealt a bad hand in life. Now I know what you're thinking. Well, Gatsu, fuck you, it's not. No, fuck you, it is. It's the easiest place in the world to make money in. You know what you can do if you're butt broke? Your family's broke, you have $0 in your bank, no degree, nothing. You join the military and get paid a shit ton of money. All you have to do is go to the military and survive. And trust me, it ain't even that hard. Oh yeah, and when you're in the military, if you don't like it, you want to study something in college, no problem. They also cover 100% of college costs. So, you started butt broke,
Dude, this guy is such a good example of just like the average pro-America immigrant who is just completely ready to completely submit to America, to join the fascist military, to do whatever it takes to be one of the Americans, to be one of the good guys, to be basically white, to be part of capitalism's imperial core. Yeah, join the military. Yeah, just join the imperialist fascist military.
$0 in your bank, and in the military you're making decent money and studying, and after you finish studying you can get a high-paying job. You started at $0, you got no girls because you're broke, and now you're making 6 figures a year at a young age. It is the easiest country to escape from bad living conditions. You guys cannot even imagine.
You're making 6 figures a year at a young age. What the fuck is this guy fucking talking about? He's so delusional. Does anyone have experience in the military? And like, I guess he said you get a college degree and then you're making... Most people don't just get out of their college degree and start making 6 figures a fucking year. What the fuck is this guy talking about? Oh my god. The only people who get out of college making 6 figures a year are like... maybe software engineers, if you have a bachelor's. Maybe some like software engineers at the upper level might be able to start or near start making 100K, but that's a big stretch. And if you want to be a lawyer or a doctor, it's more than those 4 years. It's 6 years for a lawyer, or at least 6 years for a lawyer, and you know, like fucking 10 years or whatever to be a doctor. So this guy's so ignorant. It's unbelievable. I feel bad for him. He's just so insulated from reality. I don't think it's satire, no.
How hard and complicated this process of making it out of poverty would be in different, less developed countries. Yeah, bro, try making it out of poverty in Turkmenistan, bro. Good luck. And the American military itself is absolutely insane. Largest one in the world, can deploy forces anywhere on the planet. Just absolutely insane. With great power comes great responsibility. And invading Iraq is not responsible at all in my opinion. I've been saying positive stuff about America, but remember, it's never sunshine and rainbows with any place. There's this running joke that this is NATO at 100% power and this is NATO at 99% power. And to be honest, who can disagree? I can only imagine what American ambassadors are like during NATO briefings.
You people should be thanking Christ that I am who and what I am because you need me. You need me to save you. You do. I am the only one who possibly can.
America's military is absolutely insane. They're the #1 military in the world and it's not even close. People thought Russia was #2, but this war people realized, yeah, I just don't think that's true. The thing is, America is one of the most beautiful places in the whole world. But wait, what's that?
Well, that was such a bizarre transition. He just said, America's military is huge, and then he said, the thing is, America's one of the most beautiful... Okay, so he's not going to talk anymore about the giant military, I guess. And I love how his one example was Iraq. He couldn't bring up a single other example of American imperialism or the costs or the destruction. Just Iraq. I think Iraq was a bad idea. And again, it's the same mentality of it's like it's not systemically evil. It's not systemically made to destroy countries. It's just, oh yeah, we made a mistake in Iraq. It was just like it was an error.
Well, there we go. The Europeans try to talk shit about our trucks again. In my video, Western Europe, I talked about how the US needs more public transport to get people out of their... You know what? There's construction outside, and maybe you guys have a point with your fucking suburbs. I'm gonna close my door. My whole argument just got derailed, and I now understand why suburbs exist, just so you don't hear noises like this. But I'm still gonna read the script. Public transport to get people out of their highways and into places where they spend less time traveling in traffic. Because the less time you spend traveling, the more time you get to spend with your kids, so they're less likely to grow up as glue sniffers or Russia supporters. And on that video, I got a lot of comments saying how the US is completely different from Europe in size, and it would make less sense to build cities that look European, aka mixed-use areas, public transport, etc., since it's illegal to build mixed-use cities in the US. Okay, if that's true and Americans don't want it, then why is the land value on mixed-use places like 8 times higher than the usual places? And why does everyone want to live there? Good examples are some niche cities like San Francisco, New York, just some niche places, you know? Every time the Americans were like, yeah, okay, instead of making this zone only single-family houses and some commercial places for big Walmarts, let's mix it up a bit, huh? Do some mixed zoning and boom. They got a sprawling metropolis and their biggest cities yet. Not to mention the single-family housing literally was only created to segregate people, class-wise. And it didn't even work. It was literally just a racist ploy, and it didn't even work. So what the fuck? Why? Why? And it's not like Americans don't understand the importance.
What does he mean by it didn't work? Many cities in America are still pretty segregated, right?
Of having mixed-use areas in cities. I got a lot of comments from people in the US saying, I hate being car dependent, big-ass ugly malls, etc., but zoning laws make it hard to achieve. To make progress, zoning laws must be changed to allow for more mixed-use cities and public transportation, and infrastructure investments must be made to make these changes happen.
Yeah. Yeah, he might be an Adam something subscriber. I was literally about to say. He's literally just like, fascism, but with public transit. He almost certainly has the Adam something brainworm because, you know, he was talking about Russia and all that stuff. Anyways, I'm sorry if I came off as overly aggressive with this guy. It's just tiring. Yeah, you know what? I think I'll give this video a shot. I might not be completely read up on everything that I could possibly respond to, but we'll give it a shot. I'm just gonna go to the bathroom real quick, and if you want to support the channel, you can leave a like, comment, subscribe, and also you can join a membership, and then if you do, this cool thing comes up. So that would really help, and I'd really appreciate it. All right, I'll be back in like a minute. Yes, the membership is cool and based. Become a chemhead. Become a chemhead today. Or you can subscribe on Patreon. Either way, you get early access to my videos and a unique role in the Discord and other cool perks. But alright. Cold War video time. Midwestern Mark's already responded.
I've decided that in order to sell more merch, I should do a face reveal wearing some of it. So are you ready? Here we go. Boo. Founded edition Churchill character pin before it sells out, with more characters coming in the future. Link in the description down below. The year is 1917. Fighting rages on the Eastern Front of the First World War. Both Germany
Oh, I like this video. I must have watched it a long time ago.
and Russia are on the brink of collapse. Soldier, I need you to bring me this man. Got it. Found him, sir. What? No, not Lenin. Lenin, the Russian communist. What? Why would I need a beetle? Lenin, the Russian communist. He was exiled to Switzerland. You know what? I'll do it myself. Who wants to start a revolution?
I mean, that's not really exactly accurate. You know, it was not that easy for Lenin to just get to Russia. I think he actually had to fight pretty hard to actually get back to Russia. And that is, of course, a narrative that, like, you know, the Germans, like, purposely sent Lenin to destabilize Russia or whatever. And it's like, first of all, it's not really all that true. Echoing audio? Was it echoing before, or is it just echoing now? I'm looking forward to the great canceling of the history channels. When does that video drop? That video is dropping tomorrow morning, baby. It's not going into, like, all of the history channels or whatever. It's just mainly talking about what if Altis for the most part. Get Zizek's ass. I already got his ass. He missed it. Yeah, I would use my headphones that would prevent audio echo, but I can't fucking find them, so it's very annoying. But maybe these will work. Well, in the meantime, we'll just keep watching the video.
The Germans put Lenin on a train and sent him all the way back to Russia, hoping he and his mates would create an internal crisis. And create an internal crisis they did. The government was overthrown, and Lenin was in charge. He immediately pulled out of the First World War, made the country communist, started a 3-year-long civil war, got shot, broke the economy, caused a famine, and then he died.
What the fuck? Holy shit. Oh my god, what the fuck? Holy shit, what the fuck? I get that they call it oversimplified, but okay, cool. Why a like on the video? Because I watched this I watched this video, I assume, many years ago, because I used to be a fan of this channel when I was, like, in high school. I've been watching YouTube for quite a while.
Crisis they did. The government was overthrown, and Lenin was in charge. He immediately pulled out of the First World War, made the country communist, started a 3-year-long civil war, got shot, broke the economy, caused a famine, and then he died. On his deathbed, he said,
Oh my god, there's so fucking much.
government was overthrown, and Lenin was in charge. He immediately pulled out of the First World War, made the country communist, started a 3-year-long civil war,
It portrays him as just this absolute chaos lord who just like completely like brought horror onto Russia. His video about the Russian Revolution has more details about Lenin. Yeah.
Got shot, broke the economy, caused a famine, and then he died. On his deathbed he said, "Hey man, tell whoever's in charge of giving people jobs not to let that jerk Stalin become the next leader. By the way, who did I put in charge of giving people jobs? That would be Stalin, sir."
Yeah, I mean, that's another... I mean, he's actually kind of pointing out another big aspect of the, He's pointing out another big aspect of, the issues with Lenin's testament, which is that Lenin... There isn't 100% proof, but it's pretty much certain that Lenin appointed Stalin to be the head of the Central Committee. And then literally a year later, Lenin's like, oh no, actually this guy sucks. He's too mean. Get him off. But Lenin personally knew Stalin for many years, and he personally appointed Stalin like less than a year ago to the Central Committee. I'm too late for the Zizek stuff, but you appear to be a bit pedantic when discussing the failure of previously existing socialism. He isn't denying the success and advances of the individual projects. I mean, he says communism was in the 20th century was a an absolute failure. So that sounds like a... I mean, it's a pretty condemnatory thing to say. He also said Stalinism on some abstract level was caused more human suffering than Nazi Germany. He also does not appear to have a great opinion of Lenin. He has a more positive opinion of Lenin, but still very negative. Yeah, I mean, I recommend, if you look at it, to just read Capitalism's Court Jester, the article. Because that kind of destroys him. Yeah, it caused a famine. The famine occurred during the Civil War. Yeah, and like, again, the Civil War happened because of the October Revolution, which happened because Russia was still a bourgeois democracy. So what Lenin did was objectively the right thing to do for the people, for the workers under socialism. But it's oversimplified, so he has to like speed past it. But he still makes it seem as bad as possible. Like, he just completely demonizes Lenin in the space of like a minute.
Stalin was a rising force in the Communist Party. He still had some opponents, but conveniently, all of them were arrested or disappeared. So that was lucky. And so Stalin took over. He implemented his five-year plans, which transformed the country from an agriculture-based economy to an industrial one. And like Lenin before him, he reigned with terror. Anyone who dared criticize or oppose him would either be killed or left to rot in the horrendous Soviet work camps. Then a short man with a silly...
That's just not true. In the time of the Great Purges, yes, pretty much. Like, around the time of the Great Purges, like 1937, 1938, like if you were found to be criticizing Stalin, like, for sure, like, there's a very good chance you'd, go to jail. But people were allowed to, petition local governments criticizing the USSR for this or that issue. They were allowed to, do this or that thing, criticizing aspects of the USSR. But yeah, I mean, attacking like the top or attacking Stalin was not a great idea. It did absolutely fail to establish world socialism, which is kind of the main predicament we find ourselves in, didn't it? Yes, but he says 20th century communism was an absolute failure. So you can like read into that's what he meant. But when you combined all of the things Zizek has said and done, like for example in that debate saying private property is literally the best system we have. It's not a great system, but it's the best system we have. If you just read the article, I don't really want to get into a debate about it because people get really emotional when defending Zizek. I would just recommend reading the article.
A stash tried to take over the world, punched the Russians all the way to Moscow, and then the Russians, with some help from their faithful ally, the Winter, punched them all the way back to Berlin. At this point, being allies, America, the UK, and the Soviet Union were good chums. They held a couple of conferences near the end of the war to decide what would happen next. Hey Stalin, after all your trials and tribulation, you must be pretty happy to be standing here in Berlin. Tsar Alexander made it all the way to Paris. Just give me a second. Hey man, I think something's up with Stalin. I know, right? What should we do? Shall I tell him about the bomb? Yeah, tell him about the bomb. That will scare him. So, we got this crazy new big A-bomb that can destroy an entire city in one go. Yes, my spies told me already. Oh wait, I meant to act surprised. Wow, that's amazing. He already knew. How? Am I sure I want to send nuclear secrets via unsecure public coffee shop Wi-Fi? Am I ever? Dude, use a VPN. And speaking of VPNs, if, like me, you take internet safety seriously, then you need NordVPN.
Yeah, I mean, this channel is just terrible for actual history. It goes so fast over everything. I know it's called oversimplified, but like, Harry Truman was very anti-communist and very aggressive, and say what you will, but like, Stalin was not the most aggressive on in terms of foreign policy, you know, in terms of being openly aggressive against England and France and the like. Like, he tried to ally with England and France for years from 1933. Molotov in his memoirs criticizes Stalin for not being more aggressive. So like, yeah, it was really, a lot of it came down to Truman was like really aggressively anti-communist and anti-Stalin. This isn't to say Stalin was like, you know, completely conciliatory. But a lot of it was Truman, not Stalin.
America dropped their big A-bomb on Japan, and World War II officially came to an end. Hooray, we won! Okay, so now it's time to establish the New World Order. Stalin, you're in charge of Eastern Europe. Now, we want you to let them all hold elections. Oh yes, of course, elections. And these elections will be free and fair, right? Oh yes, certainly, free and fair. Definitely free and fair. Communist, 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 communist. If that's not free and fair, I don't know what is. Throughout Eastern Europe, Soviet puppet governments were established as a buffer zone between the USSR and the West, with Churchill proclaiming an Iron Curtain had descended across the continent. The relationship between the old allies was deteriorating fast. Over the next few years, the British intervened in the Greek Civil War to prevent a communist takeover. In Turkey, the Russians began demanding more control of Turkey's sea access routes, which prompted the US to send their largest battleship.
Does he point to all the countries in Western Europe and go, capitalist, 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 capitalist? No, of course he doesn't. And also, like, Operation Gladio under NATO openly, oh my god, I wonder if he's even going to mention Operation Gladio or like any of that.
To Turkey for a friendly visit. After World War II, Iran was now occupied by both the Soviets and the British, with an agreement to both pull out once the war was over. The British pulled out. Stalin was like, you know what? I think I might stick around. All in favor of kicking Russia out of Iran? You want to know something? You guys suck. Pressure from the UN forced the Soviets to leave, and with the establishment of NATO, the Soviets had no doubt that the West was out to encircle and destroy them. And America announced the Truman Doctrine, in which they basically said, those guys are not cool, cannot be trusted, and we will do everything we can to prevent the spread of communism around the world. Many viewed this moment as the official declaration of the Cold War. Back in Europe, everyone was living in a post-apocalyptic void brought on by the Second World War. Cities reduced to rubble, not enough food, it was terrible. This is great. The more they suffer, the more likely it is they'll turn to communism. Dude, you're really messed up. What's wrong with you? My father used to punish me severely. America realized what was going on and quickly made a move. Under the Marshall Plan, they sent $12 billion to Western Europe for its economic recovery. The countries of Stalin's Eastern Bloc looked on with envy. Hey, Czechoslovakia, you want to come get some economic aid? Yeah, but I have to check with my mom first. Sorry, America. I can't come. This was a full-on economic battle raging between capitalism and communism in Europe. If the Western nations developed faster and better than the East, that would be a defeat for Stalin. So he set up his own rival economic recovery plan, which he called Comecon, and he also set up Common Form, which gave him more political control over the Eastern Bloc. But nowhere did this economic battle rage harder than in the city of Berlin. Caught over 100 miles behind Soviet lines, the city had been divided up between the Allies.
I mean, the USSR also heavily, the Russian SSFR or whatever heavily invested in the other members of in Eastern Europe. I mean, they heavily and they had very equitable and fair trade deals with these countries, sort of like modern China has pretty equitable and fair trade deals with other countries. The USSR did the same. The book Is the Red Flag Still Flying talks about this, how the trade deals between the USSR and the countries in Eastern Europe were very equitable. Like the not the USSR, the Russia and the other countries. Russia was not like, it wasn't imperialism in that Russia was like gaining a bunch of wealth and power from these countries because these Eastern European countries were also gaining a lot as well. Like it was a pretty equitable trade balance. So the biggest country was not just like completely exploiting these other countries, unlike what America does and still does. Like America may have invested to a decent extent in Western Europe. But I mean, what he doesn't really point out is the main reason that happened was just to prevent communism. Like they just didn't want communism to happen, so they made sure to actually invest in these countries. And in line with that is why a lot of these countries also took a social democratic turn to concede to communist ideas, because the USSR had free education and free healthcare, and these ideas were threatening to Western Europe. So a lot of these countries became social democracies. Why are you saying Russia and not the USSR? Because I'm talking about how within the USSR, Russia was trading with the other socialist republics in Eastern Europe.
And the Western segments were still under Western control. East Berliners could travel freely to West Berlin, see the economic prosperity, and think, maybe this communism thing ain't so great after all. I'm gonna have fun tonight.
Oh, God.
You're home late. Oh, Stalin. I was just out with my friends. Friends? You stink of capitalism. You're out engaging in imperialist debauchery again. I swear, Ivan, I can't keep doing this. Stalin wanted the West out, so he said, hey, guess what? I'm blockading all of your supply routes to West Berlin. What are you gonna do about it? I suppose we'll just fly the supplies in. Alright, Truman, you win this round. The Berlin airlift was an incredible undertaking and a major success for the Western Allies, and Stalin ended his blockade of West Berlin. His aggressive actions worried the West, but not as much as this did. The Soviet Union had developed their very own atomic bomb. The USA no longer had a nuclear monopoly. The world now knew that if a major war broke out between the two superpowers, it would be more destructive than anyone could imagine. So it was comforting when Stalin came out and said that war between the Soviet Union and the West was unlikely. Oh, wait, inevitable. He said it was inevitable. Hey, you know who I haven't checked in on in a while? My good friend China. Whoa, what happened to you? What happened to them was a full-blown civil war that had been going on since 1927. The People's Liberation Army, under the leadership of Mao Zedong, successfully defeated the Republic of China, who fled to Taiwan. The now communist China and the Soviet Union signed a mutual defense treaty. This was terrible news for the West. But wait, there's more. After the Second World War, Korea was divided along the 38th parallel. In the north, the Soviets set up a communist regime. In the south, America set up an anti-communist regime. Both were led by very sweet-looking old men, but don't let that deceive you. They were both ruthless dictators, and both dreamed of reuniting Korea under their own regime. Now that he had the bomb, Stalin was feeling a little more cocky, and he finally gave Kim permission to attack. The North launched a surprise invasion of the South on June 25th, 1950. With Soviet aid, the North Koreans steamrolled through, taking Seoul in just 3 days and replacing one ruthless dictator.
The whole border between North and South was not like, yeah, the whole border between North and South was not an actual like border. It was basically like a military it was a military border. It wasn't like a real actual border. Both countries knew that a war was inevitable, that there was going to be a war. So yeah.
With another. The UN were freaking out and quickly created an emergency force made up of troops from 16 countries to defend the South. The West still held Busan and made landings at Incheon near Seoul. They pushed the North Koreans out of Seoul, replacing the ruthless dictator that had replaced the first ruthless dictator with the same ruthless dictator that had previously been replaced by the new ruthless dictator. And the West then continued all the way up the Korean peninsula. At this point, China was getting worried that the UN may just keep going. The US had sent this guy to lead the operation. After winning the Pacific theater of World War II, General Douglas MacArthur's head was big and his balls were bigger. He reassured President Truman that there was absolutely no way at all that the Chinese would ever get involved. Meanwhile, 500,000 Chinese troops were crossing into Korea. Nuke 'em. No. Nuke 'em. No. Ah, come on. You're fired. The US considered the nuclear option, but now that the Soviets also had the bomb, they didn't want to risk all-out global destruction. The communists pushed the West right back almost to the exact same spot they had all started from, and they ended up in a stalemate, where they remained until both sides finally agreed to work towards a peace settlement in 2018. Back in America, Americans decided they wanted a new president who would be tough on communism, so they elected famed World War II General Eisenhower, who was really hard to draw. It's 1950.
That's so fucking funny that they wanted someone tough on communism, as if Truman wasn't tough on communism. That's so funny.
53. Hey Stalin, how you doing? Oh, he's dead. He had a cerebral hemorrhage, and his reign of terror kinda came back to bite him in the ass, because he had imprisoned all of his best doctors, and those that were left were too terrified to treat him. The new leader, Nikita Khrushchev,
I'm almost certain that's just a complete, totally fucking made up myth. That there was no doctor in the USSR that could actually properly treat him. Like, that is like, that is the kind of thing you hear and you're like, okay, yeah, sure. Korea was briefly united, but that changed when 2 US officials devised a plan to divide Korea and did by drawing a line on the National Geographic map. Yeah, and another thing they don't mention is how during the Korean War, China was about to take back Taiwan, which was owned by the fascist nationalists under Chiang Kai-shek, and the U.S., even though it had absolutely no jurisdiction or right to do so, blockaded China from doing so.
called a meeting and said, "Hey guys, you know how Stalin was imprisoning and murdering us all for doing basically nothing? Yeah, he was kind of a jerk. I'm really not sure how this is news to you. Khrushchev went on a campaign of de-Stalinization. Statues of Stalin were taken down, Stalingrad was renamed, and Khrushchev announced that he wanted the Soviet people to be happy and would allow greater freedom in the Soviet Union. So how did that work out? Well, an uprising in East Germany was brutally suppressed, a revolution in Hungary was brutally suppressed, and
Stalin made a lot of mistakes, but the whole Khrushchev speech thing was so filled with just complete lies and bullshit and made up shit, and it was basically just his way of, you know, gaining his own power. Because what people never talk about is Khrushchev literally launched basically a coup, because there was like the political committee in the USSR or whatever, the top body of like governmental power, where people like Molotov and Malenkov and all of Stalin's other closest allies were going to like elect Malenkov or whatever, and Khrushchev basically came in and with the help of Georgy Zhukov, the USSR general, launched a coup, and then Khrushchev came to power. So the reason people always talk about how like, oh, if Khrushchev was lying or dishonest, then why did no one speak up against the Khrushchev coup or anything, or about the Khrushchev secret speech? And that's because everyone who could have was forcibly silenced and arrested. They had no choice. There was nothing they could do in terms of speaking up.
and demonstrations in Poland were brutally suppressed, although he did finally allow some mild reforms. Back in the Soviet Union, he permitted more cultural expression, but then began banning stuff based on his own personal taste. Modern art looks like a child urinated on a canvas. Banned. Jazz music sounds like the feeling of needing to fart. Banned. Your poetry is really depressing. How could anyone in the Soviet Union be depressed? You're banned. Khrushchev wanted the Soviet people to be happy, but not like that, or that, or that. Young people began enjoying abhorrent Western pop culture. Son, remove that disgusting imperialist apparel at once.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty disgusting video because it's just so... It's completely washed over all of the U.S.'s imperialism. I wonder if he's going to talk about U.S. imperialism, like, at all.
Shut up, Dad. You can't tell me what to do. Well, would you look at that? Turns out he can tell me what to do. The West had initially liked the cut of Khrushchev's jib, but world events soon soured relations even more. The two sides were spying on each other a whole lot throughout the Cold War. The KGB had spies and informants in nearly every aspect of Western life and government, so much so that whenever the US tried to send spies into the Soviet Union, the KGB were usually ready to arrest them on the spot. Members of the Manhattan Project aided the Soviet Union in acquiring the bomb. Some American officials believed they were on the wrong side. I'll sell you 3 secrets for $5 million. Okay, go ahead. The Allies are digging a tunnel under East Berlin to tap your communications. There's an American agent living at this address in Moscow, and sometimes, when I'm home alone, I like to put on my wife's dresses, sit in the corner, and cry for hours. Very interesting. In America, fear took hold during the Red Scare and the McCarthy trials. American values imploded as fear of communism collided with freedom of thought and expression, and communist kind of became a buzzword thrown around to describe anything people didn't like. Hollywood? Communist. Your next door neighbor's dog? Communist. When the grocery store cashier asks if you need a bag when you clearly can't carry 10 tubs of baconaise in your hands? Communist. But one area in particular where the US had an edge over the Soviet Union was in its espionage technology. In particular, U-2 spy planes flew across Russia carrying out surveillance from the skies. There was a nasty incident in 1960 when one was shot down and Khrushchev was furious. Who the hell is this? He's a high-altitude weather enthusiast who flew off course. Okay, that sounds plausible. Wait a minute. Why does he have a gun and a poison needle? Because he's a very naughty high-altitude weather enthusiast. But much to America's concern, the Soviet Union appeared to be ahead in the space race. Everyone freaked out when Russia launched the world's first satellite, and then they actually sent a man into space. Even worse, there also appeared to be a missile gap in the Soviets' favor, and Khrushchev was so confident that he even allowed the US to set up a technology exhibit in Moscow, attended by a certain Vice President Richard Nixon. Check this out. We have color TV. Yes, but we've been to space and can obliterate you with our massive nuclear arsenal. Check out this vegetable peeler. Tensions increased further when both sides upgraded their atomic bombs to hydrogen bombs. And after West Germany was allowed to join NATO in 1955, Khrushchev set up the Defensive Warsaw Pact, strengthening the military ties between the Soviet Union and its satellite states. In 1960, Americans decided they wanted a new president who would be tough on communism, so they elected John F. Kennedy. The Soviet Union was advancing its technology, but it was also bleeding its coffers dry, and all of the money was going towards the military, not the people. Life under communism was still as hard as ever, and Berlin remained a thorn in the Soviet side. The contrast between the economically prosperous West and the struggling East was clearer day by day, and East Berliners were still able to freely travel to the West. Now, many of them were deciding to stay there.
Free healthcare, free education. You know, a country's not built off of the backs of exploiting the third world ruthlessly. Like, oh my god, dude. Wasn't the missile gap a lie? I don't know enough about it, but didn't the US have more nukes? Yeah, when he said that, that sounds very off, I'm pretty sure. Do people actually get their history from these videos? Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. You know, like, if you're not super into history and it's more a casual thing, like I used to be, yeah, I really liked Oversimplified when I was younger, for sure.
Millions defected to West Germany via West Berlin, causing Eastern factories to lose workers and taking a heavy toll on the economy. Soviet leaders decided this couldn't continue any longer. First, Khrushchev tried this: leave West Berlin, or else. Or else what? Or else I'll be really mad at you. Yeah, no, we're gonna stay. Listen, man, West Berlin is ours, East Berlin is yours. That's just how it is. Kennedy felt pretty good about his show of American resolve. But wait a second, did you catch that? Let's replay it.
East Berlin is yours.
Uh-oh, Kennedy just told Khrushchev that the USA wouldn't interfere in what the Soviets did with their section of Berlin, so Khrushchev came up with a new idea. We're gonna build a wall, and it's gonna be a big, beautiful wall, and it's gonna keep out all the Mexicans. Just as gonna keep in these Berliners. Oh, sorry, it's gonna keep in all the Mexicans. On August 13th, 1961, Berliners woke up to find their city divided into two, with barbed wire and guards blocking the border between East and West. Over time, a wall was constructed throughout the city. Families were torn apart. Thousands would risk their lives escaping over the wall, and hundreds would die trying. To the despair of Berliners, the West were unable to do anything about it, but the wall did put on full display the failure of the communist system. As Kennedy said, democracy is not perfect, but we have never had to put a wall up to keep our people in. As part of the agreement between the two sides, US diplomats were still allowed to travel to East Berlin, but suddenly, East Berlin crossing guards started giving them the business, and Kennedy was like, nah. In October, the US rolled tanks up to the crossing point at Checkpoint Charlie as a show of strength. The Soviets did the same, and the two were in a standoff. They stayed like that for 16 hours, and the world braced for nuclear Armageddon. Thankfully, though, Kennedy called Khrushchev directly and was like, hey man, this is getting way too hot. How about you back your tanks up by an inch and we'll do the same? Sounds good. Okay, how about you back your tanks up by another inch and we'll follow suit? Alright, hey, you want to do another inch? And they both very slowly inched away from the apocalypse. Phew, let's hope.
The whole wall thing is framed literally just as like the Germans the East Germany just wanted to keep people from running to West Germany. It's not like there was any paranoia about infiltration from spies or, you know, just a general mistrust, you know, given that like the NATO and Operation Gladio was filled with a bunch of brutal Nazis who were, you know, willing to do anything basically. Michael Prenti talking about how it was a space chase, not a race. Yeah, pretty much. East Germany also had free sex reassignment surgery while West Germany had it banned. That's cool. I didn't know that. Fellow Traveler has a video about East Germany that I need to watch because I don't know much about it.
That's the biggest crisis of my presidency. It wasn't.
So we're like in the 1960s, and he has not made one mention of the countless U.S. coups. He's not mentioned the IMF. He's not mentioned the World Bank, and how all of these directly tie into the Cold War because basically it was a fight between neoliberal capitalism and socialism. You could maybe say the USSR wasn't socialist by Khrushchev's time. I won't really get into that. But hey, let's
This
let's
video
keep
was made
going. Let's
possible
see what
by
else they
Skillshare,
got.
an online learning community where you can learn just about anything. Support my channel by signing up using the link below and get your first 2 months for free. For anyone who thinks recent US history has never been as crazy as it is right now, allow me to present to you the 1960s, extreme cultural division, major political assassinations, and the closest the world has ever come to nuclear apocalypse. Shocked by the CIA's intrusive methods for putting down socialism in Latin America, a certain Fidel Castro met with a certain Che Guevara in a bar in Mexico City, and the two of them decided they should grow some awesome beards and overthrow the Cuban government, which is exactly what they did. Cuba had been America's summer playground, and America did...
Intrusive methods. That's all it is, apparently. Intrusive methods. He gives literally like one sentence to American imperialism and American foreign intervention, and it's literally just
socialism in Latin America. A certain Fidel Castro met with a certain Che Guevara in a bar in Mexico City, and the two of them decided they should grow some awesome beards and overthrow the Cuban government, which is exactly what they did. Cuba had been America's summer playground, and America didn't like seeing a communist regime being set up in its own backyard. So the US immediately began training up Cuban exiles to invade Cuba and overthrow Castro. However, as the day of the operation came closer, Kennedy wanted to conceal any US involvement in the plan, so he massively scaled back American air support, and as a result, the Bay of Pigs invasion was a humiliating defeat for America. But Castro felt there was still an impending US threat to his regime. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, Khrushchev had a lot of medium-range nuclear missiles that couldn't reach America, but they could if they were positioned, say, on an exotic Caribbean island off the coast of Florida. Hey, I'm a communist who hates America. You're a communist who hates America. You know what that means? We should fall in love. I was just gonna suggest you set your missiles up in Cuba. Oh, no, you're right. That's a better idea. Be still like beating heart. On October 14th, 1962, a U-2 spy plane over Cuba noticed something strange. Sir, you need to look at this photograph. You're right. That's the cutest dog I've ever seen. Sir, I was referring more to the Soviet missiles. America freaked out as they realized what was going on. They were completely vulnerable, and they had to act fast. They knew that airstrikes or an invasion of Cuba would likely mean nuclear war with the Soviet Union. So Kennedy came up with another...
So yeah, they're not going to mention how America had first put its missiles in Turkey on the USSR's border. Oh, man. Oh, man.
Another idea. A blockade. The US Navy announced it would stop and search any Soviet ships heading to Cuba and would sink any that did not comply. In response, the Soviet put its military into full combat readiness. The US did the same and began drawing up plans for an attack on Cuba. Things were escalating fast, and both superpowers were getting ready for World War III. Emergency communications between the two sides broke down as Khrushchev rejected Kennedy's demands for the missiles to be removed. And for the first time in history, US biggest crisis of my presidency, unfortunately for him, his presidency was to end with one. Having nearly blown up the planet, a few changes were made. First, the superpowers agreed to a limited test ban treaty. Secondly, the Soviets ousted Khrushchev and replaced him with Leonid Brezhnev, who was a kisser. He liked to kiss. Both sides were deeply concerned at the prospect of nuclear war, but still, the arms race raged on throughout the 60s and 70s. US intelligence worked out that the Soviets' nuclear arsenal was not as powerful as they previously thought, but in fact, it was America that held the advantage. ABMs and MIRVs were developed, and the doctrine of man. If both sides knew they would be completely destroyed by a nuclear war, neither would risk starting one. But even without war, the world was already feeling the effects of nuclear weapons. In 1966, above the pleasant town of Palomares in Spain, a US bomber collided with a tanker mid-air, and 4 hydrogen bombs fell and landed near the town below. It hasn't exploded, so I'm sure everything's fine. Whoa, boy. Hey, I wouldn't eat that if I were you. Okay. What were you gonna do today? Go for a swim? Yeah, I wouldn't. Are you breathing right now? Yeah? Yeah, I wouldn't. It took the Americans 2.5 months to find one of the bombs, which had gone missing in the ocean. This was the 14th time America had lost a nuclear bomb since 1950. Nobody knows how many bombs the Soviet Union lost. So sleep well tonight. After Kennedy's assassination, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson took over, and he inherited a developing crisis in the East, Vietnam. Back in the 50s, the Vietnamese had kicked their French colonizers out once and for all, and the country was divided into two. In the north, a communist regime, and in the south, an anti-communist regime. Both were led by very sweet-looking old men, but don't let that deceive you. They were both ruthless dictators, and both dreamed of reuniting Vietnam under their own regime. So the north established the National Liberation Front, also known as the Viet Cong, to carry...
Wow, man. Ho Chi Minh, a ruthless dictator. I mean, he was actually very, very conciliatory from what I know by the standards of, you know, socialist leaders at the time, you know, given the necessities of actually maintaining a revolution. Even then, like, he was, yeah. Oh my god. This video is so fucking bad, dude. It's got the first half is 55 million views. I know this is the kind of video that literally everyone watches in high school and shit. Yeah, explaining the whole Cold War without talking about the dozens of U.S. interventions and coups is oversimplified. Isn't really the right word. And he mentions the USSR intervention in Hungary. He mentions the USSR intervention in Czechoslovakia. So it's not even like he's like not mentioning both sides. No, he's mentioning one side. He's mentioning how the USSR intervened, but of course he's not going at all into how the US intervened, except for one throwaway sentence. Like, that's it.
Carried a campaign of guerrilla warfare in the south with Soviet support. The US sent advisors to help train the South Vietnamese to deal with the threat, but President Diem's brutal policies pushed more and more South Vietnamese to support the Viet Cong. And over the next decade, the situation escalated to a breaking point. America feared the domino effect. That is, if South Vietnam fell to communism, would Cambodia be next, then Laos, Thailand, Burma, India? LBJ had to make a choice between losing South Vietnam or sending in the troops, and so in they went. From 1965, America found itself in a war unlike anything it had ever.
And of course that's framed, the whole idea of preventing the domino effect in American education and in general, it's framed as like a good thing to prevent the domino effect. You need to prevent communism. Like, so all of this is still fundamentally ingrained in American culture and education, that, oh, it was a hard decision to send troops in, but, you know, we had to prevent the domino effect.
Ever fought before. Let's play Spot the Viet Cong Soldier. Did you see him? Of course not. That's because millions of young American men were drafted and sent to fight a ruthless enemy who used the thick jungle as its shield. It was nearly impossible to tell where the enemy was, or worse, who it was. And as a result, the civilian population got caught up in the brutal crossfire. The city of Saigon found itself under regular attack, and America launched a bombing campaign in the north during Operation Rolling Thunder. The Viet Cong used the Ho Chi Minh Trail running through Laos and Cambodia to supply the campaign. It was a long and brutal war, and I could never do it justice in this video. But in terms of the Cold War, Vietnam was probably the biggest of many, many global conflicts that signaled a turning point. Under the threat of nuclear war, the two superpowers began working to make their relationship more constructive, and as a result, their ideological battle shifted away from the potential of direct conflict and more towards attempting to influence smaller proxy wars around the world. In the Middle East, the Soviet Union provided aid against Israel during the Six-Day War, and then again when the US backed Israel during the Yom Kippur War. In Africa, the Angolan Civil War saw US-supported South Africans fighting Soviet-supported Cubans. In the conflict between Somalia and Ethiopia, the superpowers interestingly switched sides as regimes changed, and the US continued fighting the spread of communism in its own backyard, funding the famous Contra groups to fight the socialist junta in Nicaragua. These proxy wars were fierce enough to begin with, but superpower intervention.
It's amazing how the Indonesian, so he's not really going into coups, he's mainly mentioning wars, which is very fucking weird. And I think the reason, okay, so he mentions Operation Condor. Yeah, okay. I thought that said 1968 to 1969. I was like, what the fuck is he talking about? Operation Condor was the whole entire operation.
Amplified the destruction and
is he really is his whole thing about Operation Condor really gonna be just like a single fucking line of text at the bottom of the screen? Like, that's all it's gonna fucking be. Oh my god, dude. Of course you have to specifically go into detail about, you know, Hungary and the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall, who the fuck cares about the Berlin Wall, dude? Compared to something like Operation Condor.
Created alarming levels of human suffering throughout the Third World. And in Vietnam, that human suffering was all being broadcast back home via good old television. Going into the late 60s, America was a changing nation. This became this. This became this. And this became this. The new slogan that was taking root: make love, not war. The majority of Americans did not approve of Johnson's handling of the Vietnam War. And in 1968, a silent majority elected law and order candidate Richard Nixon. As the Vietnam War appeared to be increasingly unwinnable and public opinion turning increasingly sour, Nixon made the decision to begin bringing the troops home and ended U.S. involvement in Vietnam by 1973. 2 years later, the South fell. That's
not really accurate, actually. Nixon escalated the war, actually. He escalated the bombings in Laos and Vietnam before he de-escalated. Not really de-escalated. America just lost the war, and so they had to leave.
The Cold War was now taking its toll on both superpowers. In Russia, a huge percentage of the budget was still going to the...
And there's no mention of just the utterly horrific human cost of you know, the horrific human cost of the Vietnam War, the countless people dead, the environmental destruction, all of that to prevent what was a communist country. Yeah, they used far more bombs. Yeah, in Vietnam alone, they dropped more bombs than all the bombs dropped by all the sides in all of World War II. In that relatively tiny war zone compared to the massive war zone that was World War II. So, I mean, just the destruction was horrific. But who would dare actually go into the amount of death and destruction that caused?
Military. People were still hungry, and they just didn't have access to the same lifestyle and goods as the West. And what did they have to show for it? They weren't even winning the space race anymore. Both sides needed to reduce spending in order to rescue
Oh, I
their
fucking hate this video so much. Oh my god.
economies, and so both welcomed with open arms an easing of hostilities, otherwise known as détente. To improve relations, Nixon became the first U.S. president to visit Moscow in 1972, and Brezhnev returned the gesture a year later. A number of treaties were signed, including the 1972 SALT Agreement that limited nuclear weapons. Relations with China were even improving via ping-pong diplomacy when the U.S. table tennis team went on a tour of the People's Republic. However, internally, China was still pushing anti-capitalist propaganda.
Dude, I watched fellow travelers video on the Soviet Union yesterday, and there was a absolutely wild quote from Mao that was like, what the fuck is he saying about like how the China has to ally with the US against the USSR. It's like, what the fuck? The Sino-Soviet split was such a horrible tragedy, and it was just so bad. Khrushchev's speech like just was so destructive to the world communist movement. Like it completely tore apart. So many communist parties around the world after that speech were torn in two because of the argument and debate that came out of that. And you can argue whether Mao was justified in being super pissed at the USSR and Khrushchev. I think he was rightly so super pissed, but I don't think it was the right move to just like completely or mostly break from good relations with the USSR. There was a lot more that they could have gotten from cooperating than actually being opposed.
Which led to some mixed messages. Nixon even visited China in 1972, and it was a battle of laughs.
Today, the president walks among priceless treasures from China's golden age. Among them, a pair of ear stoppers used by the emperor to keep from hearing criticism.
That's hilarious.
Everything was going great for Nixon, until it was uncovered that back home he was being a very naughty boy and violating constitutional protocol. I'm announcing today my resignation as president, and I'm passing the office to my vice president, Gerald Ford. Wow, you mean in America the people can actually remove their leader when he breaks the law? Why not just rule by force? Where's the corruption? And my first act as president is to pardon Nixon. There it is. After the whole fiasco, Americans decided what they really wanted was just a nice, safe guy who wouldn't cheat on them. So they elected Jimmy Carter, and the two sides met in Vienna where they signed yet another strategic arms limitation treaty. It's an honor, Premier Brezhnev. Likewise, President Carter. Please don't do that. But that's not to say there was no longer any tension between the two sides, because there was. Heaps of it. Once again, the Soviet Union put down further attempts at reform and rebellion in the Eastern Bloc. The Euro missile crisis saw new and improved classes of intermediate-range missiles being deployed in Europe. In 1979, the Soviets thought it would be a good idea if they had their own Vietnam and invaded Afghanistan to prevent a US-sponsored Islamic insurgency. And in response to these various crises, Olympic Games were boycotted. Conservatives were concerned that US policy had become too soft. And in 1980, they decided they wanted a president who would be tough on communism. So they elected Ronald Reagan. And Reagan came in guns blazing. Concerned at the Soviet Union's human rights violations, he made a speech calling them an evil empire, and he came in guns blazing. Concerned at the Soviet Union's human rights violations, he elected Ronald Reagan, and Reagan came in guns blazing. Concerned at the Soviet Union's human rights violations, he made a speech calling them an evil empire.
Concerned at the Soviets' human rights violations, he made a speech calling them the evil empire. The most human rights violating American president in American history, which is saying a lot. The president that the president that launched more foreign interventions and coup attempts and wars and CIA operations than any other president, was concerned about the human rights violations. Holy shit, dude. That's so fucking funny. Why would you say that? I cannot believe they wrote that in the script, and we're just like, yeah, he was concerned about the human rights violations.
And he also wanted to renew the arms race using technological advances in computing and lasers. He came up with the Space Defense Initiative, also known as Star Wars, which was basically a big defensive anti-nuke shield around the country. But a lot of people thought it was a pretty dumb idea. The Soviet Union perceived this shift in rhetoric as the USA getting ready for war, and they were feeling especially threatened as their relationship with their communist ally China had broken down. Relations took a big hit in 1983 when the Soviets shot down a Korean airliner that had strayed into their airspace, and it looked like the world was going right back to mid-20th century Cold War tension. But then Brezhnev got really old and died, and was replaced by this guy who was really old and died, and was replaced by this guy who was really old and war tension. But then Brezhnev got really old and died, and was replaced by this
King, Yuri Andropov. If only Yuri Andropov. Oh God, if only. Rip.
guy who was really old and died, and was replaced by this guy who was really old and died, and he was replaced by Mikhail Gorbachev. Coming into office in 1985, he was the real game changer. His philosophy differed a lot from previous Soviet leaders. He felt that the reason the Soviet system and economy was struggling was that it didn't allow the Soviet people to find satisfaction in their work, because they weren't allowed to speak freely and lived in fear. Gorbachev wanted the Soviet people to be happy, but unlike previous Soviet leaders, he actually made the change happen. Within the first couple of years, he began the political movement for more openness and transparency, and the restructuring of the Soviet political and economic systems. And change very quickly took effect. People could criticize the government, they could enjoy Western pop culture, the media interviewed Margaret Thatcher, but most importantly, the Soviet people could now enjoy Pizza Hut. All hail to Gorbachev. He also knew that the arms race needed to end in order to rescue the Soviet economy, and a positive relationship with the West must be established. Constructive dialogue reopened and resulted in the INF Treaty, which saw all intermediate-range missiles eliminated, which was huge. Reagan's tone towards the Soviet Union began to soften, and things were looking up. But what would these reforms mean for the Eastern Bloc? For decades, the Soviets had been brutally suppressing any attempt at change. Now, would they be allowed? And that was the exact question on Hungary's lips when the Prime Minister visited Moscow. Gorbachev's response: he didn't necessarily agree with the reforms, but he wouldn't stop them either. He was prepared to let the Eastern Bloc choose its own future. This was massive, and the Hungarian leaders began planning free, multi-party elections. Poland followed suit, and also held elections in June. The anti-Soviet party, Solidarity, won 99 out of 100 seats in the Senate. But not just that. In Hungary, the barbed wire border between East and West was removed. The Iron Curtain was unraveling. But not all Eastern Bloc leaders were happy. Notably, East Germany was still ruled by a hardline Stalinist, Erich Honecker. Many East Germans were still eager to get out. They had been trapped by the Berlin Wall, but now they were doing the math. If they could travel to Hungary, and Hungary's border with the West was loosening, could they now make it to the West? That summer, East Germans decided Hungary was the latest top holiday destination. They traveled there in droves, and using various methods, tens of thousands crossed the border into Austria and the West. Honecker was furious, and Bloc traveled to Hungary, but that civil liberties train had started rolling, and it wasn't stopping. Thousands more flocked to the West German embassy in Prague, where they stormed the fence around the embassy gardens, and a temporary refugee camp was set up. In September, deals were struck to allow the refugees to travel west via train. Back in East Germany, the people were running on a civil liberties high, and they wanted their next hit. Dissent was growing. Over time, demonstrations turned to mass protest, with plainclothes secret police officers doing their best to put down the dissent, but it had grown well out of their control. And worse, the biggest demonstration was yet to come. We're gonna put all of this down by force, right guys? Guys? Unfortunately, everyone had realized what he had not. This was bigger than them, and the entire East German Politburo voted him out of power. On November 4th, over 500,000 East Germans took to the streets of East Berlin. For many, there was still one big target left in their sights: that damn wall. The pressure on the East German government was too great, and on November 9th, they made a bit of a chaotic announcement that the travel ban between East and West was being lifted. The change wasn't meant to take effect until the next day, and crossing guards still had orders to shoot on sight any who tried to cross. But that night, huge crowds gathered at the crossing points, and the guards were overwhelmed. In an astronomically historic moment, after decades of family separation and travel restriction, the people were allowed to pass through. East and West Berliners couldn't believe it and celebrated together throughout the night. Some even climbed the wall and began to topple it. The Iron Curtain had fallen, and a year later, Germany would be reunited. Elections in Bulgaria, a peaceful revolution in Czechoslovakia, and a violent one in Romania brought to an end communist authority in the Eastern.
What is special about Yuri Andropov? I didn't know about him. He was very committed to anti-corruption. He was head of the KGB before he became premier, and he was incredibly anti-corruption. He was clearly an actual believer in socialism, in his actions and in his deeds. He wanted to reform. He was like Gorbachev, but he was a lot less naive than Gorbachev. I think he was more, realistic than Gorbachev. But yeah. East Germans, you get open borders, but you lose your entire economy. Yeah. Mic echoing? Yeah. It would be better if I had my headphones, but I don't. Sorry.
Bloc. America decided it would be best if it just stayed away and let the change happen. As the anti-communist movement continued all the way back to Moscow, Gorbachev had given the people the freedom to demonstrate. Now, they demonstrated for an end to the communist single-party rule, and Gorbachev had to give in. For the first time in history, elections were held in which candidates not officially endorsed by the party were allowed to run. Ambitious rival of Gorbachev, Boris Yeltsin, led a growing democratic movement. Now, things here get quite confusing, and the dissolution of the Soviet Union is a complicated topic, so believe me, this is oversimplified. But it went a little bit like this. The Soviet Union was made up of a number of smaller Soviet republics, the largest of which was Russia. Yeltsin got himself elected the president of Russia and began a struggle for sovereignty against Gorbachev and the greater Soviet Union. Communist hardliners were horrified at what Gorbachev was allowing, so they briefly kidnapped him and tried to set up their own emergency government. But Yeltsin and his supporters all gathered around the White House in Moscow and were like, no, we have a tank. So the hardliners had to concede and released Gorbachev. Wow, thanks Boris. That was a close one. No problem. And thanks to you for all the great freedom you've given us. Anytime, pal. And just to inform you, I've used that freedom you...
They frame it also as just like a completely popular movement of just like a, you know, a totally popular uprising of like the people against the tyrannical Soviet Union or whatever, when there's plenty of footage of people in the USSR protesting the collapse, protesting the dissolution. So it's not like everyone was just so happy. And if you look at polls, I believe at the time, people were saying, no, we don't want to dissolve the Soviet Union. We don't want this. People were saying they wanted reforms. People did want reforms. But it wasn't like they just wanted the fucking Soviet Union to collapse. And that can clearly be seen in what happened to all these countries post-collapse.
You've given us to go behind your back and make a deal with Ukraine and Belarus to dissolve the Soviet Union and set up the Russian Federation. In other words, you're no longer in charge. I am. Dude. So uncool. And so decades of tension and the everlasting threat of nuclear war finally came to an end as democratic governments were established in many of the old Soviet republics, and the world got along together forever after. Right, guys? Hey, this modern art thing is growing on me. Where can I learn to do that? Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with classes...
I believe post-USSR also, like, the Communist Party was doing extremely well in the post-collapse of the USSR in Russia, and Bill Clinton and the CIA helped, you know, rig the election to get Boris Yeltsin elected. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, pretty fucking terrible video, honestly. I wish I knew more about like the latter days of the Soviet Union so I could go a lot more in depth, but that's not a time I'm super educated about. But yeah. Gorbachev's legacy. Russia's GDP fell by 40%, salaries were cut by half, poverty went from 2.2 million in 1987 to 72 million in 1995. At least 500,000 people are now kidnapped by human traffickers. Yeah, it was absolutely the worst demographic like catastrophe of the 20th century. Not even to mention, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the US was now the premier world power, right? So like the Soviet Union was, so now the Soviet Union couldn't ever provide a counterbalance anywhere. So Iraq, free to be invaded, you know, Afghanistan, free to be invaded. The video also skews over the fact that the Mujahideen in the Soviet-Afghan War was funding the Mujahideen in the Soviet-Afghan War, which included groups that were being led by bin Laden. Yeah, absolutely. The video just ignores so fucking much. Oh my god. Oh, I watched the Russian Revolution video a while back. I don't remember anything about it. Oh my god, he does the French Revolution too. Jesus Christ. The American Revolution. They just wanted Western stuff, but still have all the good things about communism. If the Soviet people knew what they would lose, they would never have voted for Yeltsin. And again, Yeltsin came to power because of intervention by the West, by America, to help him come to power. So, I mean, Gorbachev's attempts at reforms basically just prove the point of, like, why there's some level of limitations on speech necessary when, if you give them an inch, capitalists, the CIA, they will take a mile. They will take, if you are not careful, like Gorbachev was when he, because I don't disagree with a lot of what he was trying to do with his reforms, but he was incredibly naive, and what he did basically just opened up these countries for sabotage and infiltration, and yeah, I mean, the people were just completely deluded about how, because capitalism is great at marketing itself, you know, the genes and the music and all of that stuff, and so people saw all that stuff and they wanted that, right? I don't even completely blame that they wanted these consumer products, because it looked very pretty and looked very cool, and people did not realize what the cost of these things are in terms of imperialism, as well as in terms of just, okay, you have 12 different brands of jeans now, but you ain't gonna have healthcare. You've got 18 different brands of shampoo you can buy, but you're not gonna have free education. I would ban marketing. It's the roots of all evil. Yeah, I mean, the USSR had, you know, a propaganda department in terms of trying to show why the US was bad and communism was good, but I guess that's not marketing. Yeah, he also doesn't mention the Soviet national referendum, in which 80% of people wanted to preserve the socialist economy in the Soviet Union. Yeah, it's framed, he just frames it as like people just could not wait to become the West. Yeah, extremely anti-communist video. I'm interested in the French Revolution video because there's so many misconceptions about the French Revolution as just being like a terrible disaster, when it actually made a tremendous amount of accomplishments that people do not realize. It was the most radical movement in history at the time. Oh, he doesn't even have that many videos. Interesting. I want to see if he mentions the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact.
Hitler had planned to continue his advance eastward, but he didn't want to end up fighting a war on two fronts. So for now, he made an alliance with Stalin, saying, how about we both invade Poland and split it between the two of us, and I definitely won't not refrain from not betraying you sometime in the future. Sounds good. This new alliance stunned the West. On the 1st of September 1939, German troops entered Poland, and Britain and France declared war on Germany.
Yeah, so it's the biggest, it's in my opinion, the absolute biggest falsehood in history of how... It is, in my opinion, probably the single most disgusting anti-communist example of propaganda in history. The fact that the USSR tried to ally with France and England for years and failed because the West did not want to ally with communists. But oh my god. It's just framed as Stalin making first of all, it wasn't even an alliance, it was a non-aggression pact, as countless other countries formed with Germany, but also the USSR tried to ally with the West for so long and wasn't able to. So yeah. Doesn't even mention the horrors of shock therapy. Yeah, I mean, it was the same shock therapy that the U.S. did to countries around the world before then and since then, and he doesn't mention it at all. Oh my god, I hate this fucking channel so much. The entirety of World War II was just pitting the Nazis against the USSR for them to destroy each other. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was. It objectively was. And it's just not talked about. This does not exist in the public consciousness at all. Like, maybe 5% of people are even aware that the USSR wanted an alliance with England and France. Like, 5% of people maybe are even aware of that. Whereas, like, 90% of people know that the Stalin and the USSR had an alliance. And yeah, Poland took part of Czechoslovakia, I believe, in the Munich Agreement. Poland was happily participating in the dividing up of Europe. They wanted to work with the Nazis. They wanted to cooperate with the Nazis. But Hitler did not see the Poles as human, so... Yeah, I mean... It's just insane that the American Revolution is portrayed as this beautiful thing, you know. The only reason the American Revolution wasn't bloody against its own against its own people was because it was a bourgeois revolution. It wasn't just like France before Robespierre and the others came to power. It was a bourgeois revolution, and it wasn't bloody there either. It was just it was a Congress with a bunch of, you know, rich people. It wasn't like a real revolution. Same in America, but France went on and had a real revolution. But in America, it wasn't bloody because it was a bourgeois revolution. There wasn't really that much changing of the order of things. The order of society was not made that much different. It was just one group of oligarchs passed down their power to another group of oligarchs. I'll be right back. The American Revolution was... Jacob, I don't know if you're doing this on purpose, but your message keeps showing up multiple times. If you are, you don't need to worry, it's showing up the first time. But yeah, the American Revolution was like so unradical, especially compared to the French Revolution. It was so incredibly not radical at all. Like, it didn't really do nearly as much as it's portrayed as doing. It was just a bourgeois revolution. It didn't give voting rights to anyone. It gave voting rights like to landowning men, and that's all. And of course, it didn't emancipate women in any way. It didn't emancipate the working class in any way. One of the main reasons, as is literally in the Declaration of Independence, that they did this at all was because they wanted to colonize the West. They wanted to expand into Native American territories and take that territory, which the UK didn't want because it was seen as too expensive and costly. The American Revolution was fought so that the colonists can do more colonialism. Exactly. That's fucking all it was. That's literally all it was. It was so unradical. It was so uninteresting. It was so unanything. It's like, and I remember people like, I used to think it as this beautiful thing, and the French Revolution was horrible. And really, it's absolutely the other way around. Like, the French Revolution got out of control because, as often happens, reactionaries infiltrated the movement and destroyed things. But, yeah, I'm working on a video that's probably going to talk about the French Revolution in more detail. Robespierre was an incredibly radical person. Like he was sort of like Lenin in that he was like, before literally anyone else was saying the things he was like the one person advocating for the rights of the working class. But yeah. Any more interesting videos to watch? Oh, I thought this was interesting. The new CEO of YouTube, who's replacing Susan Wojcicki, or whatever the fuck her name is. Neil Mohan is, as you can see, so he's going to become the new CEO of YouTube. As you can see, he's a member of the Council of Foreign Relations as of a year ago. This is my own journalism, by the way. I'm very proud of this. And the Council on Foreign Relations is a nonpartisan think tank. But of course what that means is it's a Western think tank that's like a bit more what's the word, liberal. You know, it's fairly liberal, you know, center left or whatever, but it's still, you know, for foreign intervention and all that stuff. So that's interesting that the CEO of YouTube is like a member of this, the new CEO. I know nothing about Robespierre. We'll have to look into him. He's really cool. I highly recommend Revolutionary Left Radio's podcast about him. About just the Revolutionary Left Radio episode about the French Revolution. It's very, very good. What is your opinion on breakthrough news? I haven't really... I've seen a little bit of them. I don't know. Are they cool? Are they anti-capitalist? They seem kind of cool, but I don't know. Are they at least anti-America? Yeah, they literally have a section just on China. Yeah, so they're not like super over the top imperialist, but still. They're very anti-America. Yeah, I need to look more into them because I'm doing another video on BeardTube. I want to do another interview video on BeardTube, but also expand beyond YouTube and like cover like the whole internet as a whole. So stay tuned for that. And also, yeah, I'm also releasing my history YouTuber video tomorrow. It's pretty short, but I think it's pretty good. So smash that bell if you want to be informed for when it comes out. I think the more people have like notifications turned on and like the little bell next to the subscribe, the better the better the more I get featured in the algorithm or whatever, because it implies that people like my channel and all that stuff. I can't find the clip. Do you have a link? I don't even want to watch that, dude. I don't want to.
Right now.
I fucking hate this guy so much. Oh, this is a clip taken from that incredible video I watched in my first ever stream. Just like the most outright far right fascist video. Yeah, I don't want to do this right now. Yo, Chemical, what's up? Discovered your channel from the Deprogram Discord. What's up, man? Or sorry, whatever you identify as. Yeah, Bad Empanada has an incredible video reacting to Vosh, where Vosh is like, you look at a lot of these Latin American third world revolutionaries, and they're just no better than fascists. But then you look at the American founding fathers, and like they were actually kind of based in a lot of ways. And then he's like, well, not the slavery, but you know, like it's like, holy fuck, what the fuck are you fucking talking about, you fucking psychopath? What are you talking about? Holy shit. But yeah. Yeah, I don't want to talk about that guy right now. Yeah, honestly, the dream would probably be would be going on the Deprogram podcast someday. That would be cool. Yeah, I've become a lot more cynical about the internet or online politics. You know, like when I first started this, I was a bit like more hopeful than I am now because of like these streamer people who are just so terrible. Like, I don't know. I think something that attracts people to streaming is that it like, I think it's just more lazy people are attracted to streaming in a lot of ways, because it doesn't require like the same amount of research or doing scripts or anything. And so naturally you get like these actually left-wing people and more just like liberal people who don't know what they're talking about and don't read or you know, anything like that. Have you read Cosmonaut magazine? It's a great theoretical journal. I think it's a I think that's a Trotskyist leaning journal. That's not to say it doesn't have any good content or anything. I'm just generally not a big fan of Trotskyists, but I think I've been on their website and I like the design of their website. What is your stance on infrared? He's a funny guy. It took me a while to really understand what people like infrared are about, and they're basically just all they are is they're wreckers. Basically, they're just that's the only reason they exist. That's the only thing they function for. They're just like fascists, basically, who want to cause trouble and cause discord and cause arguments and division by saying these crazy, inflammatory things. They're basically a continuation of the LaRoucheite movement. If you read about Lyndon LaRouche, and his movement, which were basically just fake communists who went and beat up other communists and all that stuff. It's not Trotskyist. I think they have an article there where they say like Trotskyism isn't dead, or Trotskyism is still a valuable ideology, but I don't doubt that they probably have good content. Oh, Jesus. I don't like PragerU reactions and stuff too much because that's like so lowest common denominator that everyone reacts to, but fuck it.
Motives are much less important than behavior. We all know this. If someone has good intentions but treats people badly, those good intentions mean nothing. As it is with individuals, so it is with governments. Capitalism might sound less noble than communism. The individual pursues success to the best of his abilities. That's capitalism. Versus everyone shares everything equally. That's communism. But it is capitalism that has produced freedom. And it alone has lifted millions from poverty, while communism has kept millions impoverished and, without exception, crushed freedom.
I was literally just about to say it. This is so low-hanging fruit. Like, what am I even supposed to say? This shit is so fucking boring. Like, I don't know how anyone even watches this and, like, gets a kick out of it. Like, it's not even interesting. It's not interesting at all. What is kind of interesting is this fucking guy who keeps doubling down on Hitler and Nazism being socialism. Like, I almost kind of want to watch that. And there's no better proof than how...
The Marxist narrative is that Hitler privatized the industries, crushed the trade unions, and was a capitalist shell. But is this really the case? The process of collectivization of the German...
There's no better evidence of how sometimes people using sources is full of shit than this fucking guy who just throws a bunch of bullshit at the wall to back up his bullshit. None of these sources mean anything. You're just using these sources to give credibility to an incredibly idiotic thesis that is completely disproven just by the fact of all available evidence. Finnish Bolshevik has a really great video reacting to Tick History about this, where he completely destroys Tick History. But like, oh my god, he's got sources? Look at all these sources. Thomas Sowell? That's a reliable person, citing Thomas Sowell. Very reliable. Nazism is socialism. What is the journal citation? It's literally called The Free Market. Leftism. From de Sade and Marx to Hitler and Marcuse. Holy fuck, dude. This guy's such a fucking psychopath. My god. Who's Marcuse? I don't even know who that is. Notice how none of these sources are primary ones? Yeah, I mean, primary sources are often very, very suspect to use, in my opinion. But you definitely should have at least some primary sources for sure. Just incredibly funny. So fucking funny. Any thoughts on Hamilton? Christian Prenti has a book on him and how he was more progressive in a lot of ways. I mean, from what I've seen, none of the founding fathers were particularly progressive. Like, Thomas Paine was probably the most relatively left wing of them, but he didn't even have any governmental role or anything. He didn't have any sort of influence in that way. Aaron Burr, very funnily, Aaron Burr was actually probably the most left wing of all of the actual founding fathers with political power, but he in modern times is the most demonized of all the founding fathers. I'm pretty sure Alexander Hamilton, from what I've heard, was very conservative. I already saw that message, Jacob. You don't need to send it again. In the founding fathers sector, being anti-slavery was super radical. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, none of them were very radical at all in that way. I mean, some of them were anti-slavery, but none of them freed their slaves. I think Aaron Burr might have freed his slaves before he died, but I know he did own them for a while. He inherited them. Let's see, Alexander Hamilton. So he didn't inherit slaves, and he considered himself anti-slavery, but I don't know. React to Hoser's videos? What's Hoser? Let me see something. So this video looked really funny. I saw a clip taken from this video, and it was very fucking good. And I believe NTD is a arm of the Falun Gong. So, for those who don't know, Falun Gong is obviously like the right-wing, anti-China, bizarre cult, basically. And I saw a clip from this, and it was very funny. Here's a fun idea: reacting to Conservapedia articles with a side challenge of not developing aneurysms. That's a fucking good idea. If someone can find a funny Conservapedia article, I can read that for sure.
The specter of communism did not disappear with the disintegration of the Communist Party in Eastern Europe. The collapse of the communist regimes in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe marked the end of a half-century-long Cold War between the capitalist and communist camps in the East and West. Many were thus optimistic, holding the belief that communism had become a relic of the past. The sad truth, however, is that a stealthily transformed communist ideology has instead taken hold and entrenched itself around the world. There are the outright communist regimes in China, North Korea, Cuba, and Vietnam. There are the former Soviet Union and Eastern European countries, where communist ideology and customs still exert a significant influence. There are the African and South American countries, which attempt socialism under the banner of democracy and republicanism. And then there are the nations of Europe and North America, whose body politics have become host to communist influences without people even realizing it. Communism breeds war, famine, slaughter, and tyranny. These in themselves are terrifying enough, but the damage dealt by communism goes far beyond this. It has become increasingly clear to many that, unlike any other system in history, what communism declares war on is humanity itself, including human values and human dignity. Over the course of a century, communism established massive dictatorships in the Soviet Union and China. It caused more than 100 million unnatural deaths. It enslaved billions.
Oh! We're going with over 100 million. We're going beyond. I love it. This is the good shit. This is what I'm here for, baby.
And it brought the world to the brink of nuclear war, and thus destruction. Yet more important is its deliberate and widespread destruction of the family, its instigation of social disorder, and its attack on morality, all of which are ruinous to the foundations of civilization. What then is the nature of communism? What is its objective? Why does it take mankind as its enemy? How can we escape it? 1. Communism is a devil bent on the destruction of humanity.
It is a devil bent on the destruction of humanity.
The Communist Manifesto begins, quote, "A specter is haunting Europe. The specter of communism."
I absolutely love how all the anti-communist people, like, the only fucking thing they've clearly ever read is, like, the first paragraph of the Communist Manifesto. And that's what they always refer to. Like Jordan Peterson.
The use of the term specter was not a whim of Karl Marx. The preface of this book argues that communism should not be understood as being an ideological movement, a political doctrine, or a failed attempt at a new way of ordering human affairs. Instead, it should be understood as being a devil, an evil specter forged by hate, degeneracy, and other elemental forces in the universe. The communist specter took the form of a serpent, then that of a red dragon, and it keeps company with Satan, who hates God, and exploits low-level beings and demons to wreak havoc on man. The goal of the specter is to ruin humanity, and while the divine offers salvation to humanity, communism tells man not to believe, attacks human morality so as to renounce tradition, and causes man not to heed God's instruction, and ultimately to be destroyed. Following the Cold War, the poison of communism not only continued to harm former communist countries, but also spread throughout the world. The ideological infiltration of communism has led the specter to influence human society on a global scale, and many people even think that the dark wishes of communism are their own. With this, people lose their ability to judge right from wrong, to differentiate good from evil. This, a devil's conspiracy, was almost carried out. Thus, even as the specter congratulated itself, delighted with its sinister victory, most people thought that it had been destroyed. There's nothing more dangerous than mankind being on the verge of destruction, yet ignorantly celebrating its triumph. Two, the devil's ways and means. Man was created by God, and the compassion of gods has long protected man. This the devil knew, and so it set about severing this connection to corrupt man, so that gods would no longer take care of him. The devil's approach has been to subvert the culture given to mankind by gods, corrupt human morality, and thus warp man, and make him unworthy of salvation. The turbulence of Europe, beginning in the 18th century, and the attendant moral decline gave the devil an opportunity. It set about
Moral
subverting step by
decline.
step the criteria of discernment between good and evil. It promoted atheism, materialism, Darwinism, and the philosophy of struggle. The devil
Oh, not Darwinism. Hold on. Hold on a second. I don't like the sound of that. We don't need no Darwinism in here, man. Come on.
chose Marx as its envoy among men. Marx's Communist Manifesto of 1848 advocated the violent destruction of private enterprise, social classes, nations, religions, and the family. The Paris Commune of 1871 was its first attempt at seizing power. His followers argue that political power is the central question of Marxian political science. This is both true and not true. Being clear about the ultimate aims of communism means we can recognize that political power is both important and unimportant to the communist project. It is important in that access to political power allows a rapid means of the widespread corruption of humanity. With the levers of power, communists can promote their ideology with violence and eradicate a traditional culture in mere decades or years. Yet it is also unimportant in that even without the apparatus of the state, the devil has other means of exploiting the weaknesses and shortcomings of man. To deceive, co-opt, coerce, confuse, and so overturn traditional thought, subvert order, create upheaval, and to divide and conquer with the objective of gaining global control.
True. Very true. I feel like I'm gonna get copyright struck from watching this video, honestly.
3. Communism
I feel like
is
that's
the
something the
ideology of
following
the devil.
song would do.
At the core of the evil specter is atheism and materialism, a confluence of elements from German philosophy, French social revolution, and British political economy, assembled as a secular religion meant to replace the position previously occupied by God and orthodox beliefs. Communism turns the world into its church, bringing all aspects of social life under its purview. The devil chose Marx and others as its agents to oppose and destroy the principles laid down by God for human society. It promotes class struggle and the abolition of established social structures. In the East, it launched a violent revolution and established a totalitarian state that united politics and secular religion. In the West, it undertakes progressive, non-violent communism through high levels of taxation and wealth redistribution. On a worldwide scale, it seeks to spread communist ideology to political systems.
Man,
everywhere,
are they
with the
just
goal of
trying to
undermining
make
nation-states
communism
and
look like the
establishing a
coolest
global
thing
rule of
ever?
body. This is the, quote, paradise on earth promised in communism.
Hell yeah.
Disclosed collective society without class, nations, or
Hell
government,
yeah!
based on the principles of, quote, from each according to his ability and to each according to his need. In the Communist Manifesto, Marx proclaimed, quote, the communist revolution is the most radical rupture with traditional property relations. No wonder that its development involves the most radical rupture with traditional ideas. Thus, Marx himself accurately summarized the practice of communism over nearly the past 2 centuries. God is the source of moral order, and God's morality is eternal and unchanging. Moral standards should never be determined by man, nor can they be changed by man's power. Communism tries to sentence morality to death, and to have the communist new man establish a new morality. Yet, while it denies real morality, communism uses negative methods to expel from
The
human...
devil does sound like a cool guy. He sounds like a fucking fantastic guy.
tradition all its positive factors, with the goal of having negative factors occupy the world. Traditional laws come from morality and are intended to uphold morality. Communism tries to separate morality from the law, then destroys morality by concocting bad laws and maliciously interpreting traditional ones. God calls on man to be kind. Communism agitates class struggle and advocates violence and killing. God established the family as a basic
I love that. Communism agitates class struggle as if it's a bad thing.
Communism believes that the family is a manifestation of the private capitalist system and threatens to eliminate it. God gives man the freedom to obtain wealth and the right to life. Communism seeks to eliminate private property, expropriate assets, raise taxes, monopolize credit and capital, and completely control economic life. God established the form that morality, government, law, society, and culture should take. Communism seeks the, quote, violent overthrow of the whole existing social structure. God transmitted to man...
I feel like he's just repeating himself at this point.
Traditional art recalls to mankind the beauty of heaven, reinforces faith in God, elevates morality, and nurtures virtue. Communism, on the other hand, would have man worship warped modern creations, artistic productions that stifle our divine nature, give full reign to the demonic impulse toward chaos and disorder, and manipulate the art world by spreading base, ugly, malformed, evil, and...
Picasso was a Satanist, Stalinist, sent to destroy the West.
Decadent ideas. God wants man to be humble and full of reverence and wonder at divine creation. Communism connives at the demonic and arrogance in man, encouraging him to revolt against God by amplifying the evil inherent and inescapable in human nature. It exploits the idea of freedom to encourage conduct unrestrained by morality and unfettered by a sense of duty or burden. The slogan of equality is used to stir up envy and vanity as man is tempted by fame and material interests.
What? What? That's capitalism, my dude. This is just the
metaphysical
first fucking
understanding of
episode,
the
by the
devil.
way. There's like 5 or 6 of these.
The idea of the devil being referred to in this text is that of a supernatural power. Understanding the type of thing that is the specter of communism is one of the keys to understanding the chaos the devil has sown in the world. Simply put, the specter of communism is composed of hate. It draws its energy from the hatred that wells up in the human heart. The communist specter is tied to Satan. Sometimes the two are indistinguishable, thus we will not make an effort to consider them separately. The devil's arrangements are present in both the East and the West, in every profession and in every walk of life. Sometimes its power is divided, sometimes integrated. Sometimes it uses this tactic, sometimes that. It follows no simple pattern. The devil is the initiator of an unrestricted war on mankind that has turned religion, the family, politics, the economy.
Oh, I saw that.
An unrestricted war on mankind that has turned religion, the
Homosexual movement, feminist movement.
family, politics, the economy, finance.
Illegal immigration. Cloward Piven strategy? What the fuck is that?
Military affairs, education, the academy, the arts, the media, entertainment, popular culture, social affairs, and international relations, all into battlefields.
What the fuck? George Soros. Yeah, it's all the typical stuff. Oh my god, look at this fucking graph chart.
The dark energy of the devil can spread from one sphere, group, or movement to another. After the anti-Vietnam War movement faded in the West in the 1970s, for instance, the devil manipulated rebellious adolescents to channel their energies into agitating for feminism, environmentalism, and the legalization of homosexuality. The devil's other efforts were used to subvert Western civilization from within. The devil can turn people with no good intent into its agents in the human world, using hypocrisy to deceive compassionate and innocent people who then become its apologists. The devil's agents, most of whom do not even realize their role, are everywhere in society, from the elite to the middle class to the lower classes. Thus, its activities manifest sometimes as bottom-up revolutions, sometimes as top-down conspiracy.
What the fuck?
Sometimes as reforms from the center. The devil can change forms and exist in multiple places at once. It uses lowly beings and specters in other dimensions to do its work. Pornography and drug addiction are tools used by the devil, and as long as a person's thought aligns with these qualities, the devil can control that person. Many times people think they are acting according to their own thoughts, but they failed to realize they're being manipulated.
Alright, well, I've seen enough. Communism is the devil. Communism is Satan. Communism is destroying Western society. I don't know, guys. I don't think I can be a communist anymore. Rip. But, yeah, I think I'm gonna end the stream here. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. I hope you guys had fun. If you want to support me again, watch my videos, leave helpful comments, subscribe. You can join on Patreon for early access to my videos, or you can become a member through YouTube. We need more chem heads up in here. Kawa's the only chem head so far. They're all alone at the moment, so give them some backup. If you got the money. Yeah, a new video is finally coming out tomorrow, so hope you guys enjoy that. Yeah, join the Chemhead Club. Be a cool kid. Exactly. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you have a good night's sleep. Hope you get good rest. And I will see you next time. I'm sort of liking the stream thing. I think I might do it semi-frequently, like once or twice a week, if there's interest in it and if people are enjoying these. Yeah, so I will see you guys later, next time. Bye-bye.